My husband's childhood friend spilled wine on herself and accused me of pushing her. My husband looked at her side and said, "Maya, if you are going to frame my wife, choose a room without 6 cameras and my mother holding the remote." The room froze. Maya Rivers stood beside the long dining table in a pale blue dress, completely humiliated. If you have ever been pushed into a corner by the very people who claim to be your family, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me tell you how I turned their ultimate disrespect into the perfect execution of justice. My name is Chloe. I am 32 years old, and I am the undisputed failure of my family. At least that is the narrative my mother Patricia and my younger sister Nia have peddled to anyone who will listen for the better part of a decade. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. We were hosting our third wedding anniversary dinner in our downtown penthouse. The space was filled with warm, ambient lighting, the smell of roasted garlic and herbs, and soft jazz playing through the ceiling speakers. It was meant to be an intimate gathering with close family and a few selected friends, but with my blood relatives, peace is a foreign concept. Maya was not just a random guest. She was Marcus's childhood best friend, and the woman my mother constantly hinted should have been his wife. Maya had spent the entire evening making passive-aggressive comments about my appearance, my cooking, and my lack of a traditional career. My mother, of course, fueled the fire, pouring herself another glass of Chardonnay, while loudly lamenting how difficult it must be for Marcus to support a wife who could not even finish her medical degree. Let us rewind slightly to exactly how that wine ended up ruining Maya's dress. I had stepped away from the main gathering to arrange the dessert plates on the long oak dining table. The room was temporarily empty, or so I thought. Maya slipped through the doorway holding a full glass of dark red wine, her eyes gleaming with malicious intent. She cornered me against the buffet cabinet. "You really do not belong here, Chloe," she whispered, her voice laced with venom. "Everyone knows Marcus only settled for you because he felt sorry for the pathetic college dropout. He deserves someone on his level." Before I could even formulate a response to her delusion, she dramatically tilted her glass. She poured the crimson liquid straight down the front of her expensive silk dress, letting it stain the pale blue fabric. Then she let out a blood-curdling scream and threw herself backward, intentionally hitting the edge of a heavy dining chair before collapsing to the floor in a sobbing heap. The entire party rushed into the room within seconds. My mother and Nia were the first to reach her side. Maya pointed a shaking finger at me, tears streaming down her face as she played the victim perfectly. "She shoved me," Maya cried out, her voice trembling. "She threw her drink on me out of pure jealousy." My mother immediately gasped, clutching her chest as if she were the one who had been attacked. "Chloe, how could you be so violent and unhinged?" she yelled, not even pausing to ask for my side of the story. "She has always been unstable," Nia chimed in, rushing to grab napkins to dab at Maya's ruined dress. They all turned to look at Marcus, expecting him to side with the poor, defenseless woman crying on our floor. They expected him to finally see me as the chaotic failure they had always painted me to be. Instead, Marcus just crossed his arms. He looked down at Maya, then up at the ceiling, and finally over to his mother, Gloria. My mother-in-law was sitting comfortably on the adjacent living room sofa, holding an iPad connected to our comprehensive smart home security system. That was when Marcus delivered the line that shattered their little theatrical performance. "Maya, if you are going to frame my wife, choose a room without 6 cameras, and my mother holding the remote." Gloria tapped the screen with a knowing smile, and the high-definition video of Maya deliberately pouring the wine on herself played on the large television monitor for every single guest to witness. The silence that swept through the penthouse was heavy and absolute. Maya turned a shade of ash gray, stammered a nonsensical excuse about feeling dizzy, and practically sprinted out the front door, leaving her dignity shattered on the floor behind her. You would think being caught in such a blatant, malicious lie would make my mother and sister back down. You would think the sheer embarrassment of allying themselves with a liar would compel them to apologize to me. You would be entirely wrong about the people who share my DNA. Instead of showing an ounce of remorse, they immediately shifted their tactics to protect their own fragile egos. My mother scoffed, waving her manicured hand dismissively as if the video evidence meant absolutely nothing. Well, she muttered, refusing to make eye contact with me, Maya is just highly emotional because she truly cares about Marcus. It is not easy watching him carry the massive financial burden of this marriage all by himself. That was the exact cue for my brother-in-law to step into the spotlight. Liam is a white investment banker on Wall Street. He is loud, overwhelmingly arrogant, and firmly convinced that he is the financial savior of our entire family tree. My mother worships the ground he walks on because he represents the prestige, money, and status she has always desperately craved. Naya, my younger sister, basks in the glow of his supposed wealth, treating everyone else in the family like common peasants lucky to be in her presence. Liam sauntered over to the dining table, adjusting the cuffs of his overly expensive tailored suit. He reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a sleek leather checkbook. He uncapped a gold fountain pen with agonizing slowness, making sure every eye in the room was fixed firmly on him. He scribbled a number on the paper, ripped the check out with a sharp flick of his wrist, and tossed it onto the table right in front of me. It landed next to the dessert plates I had been arranging. It was a check for $5,000. Take it and pay off your debts. Liam said, his voice projecting loudly enough to echo off the high ceilings and reach the ears of every remaining guest. Nia tells me your little tech startup is practically bankrupt. Do not let Marcus carry the dead weight of a med school dropout. It is frankly embarrassing for all of us to watch him struggle to support your failed dreams. I stared at the piece of paper resting on the polished wood. My heart pounded rhythmically against my ribs, an intense drumbeat of pure adrenaline. But I did not shout, I did not cry, I did not throw the check back in his smug, overly tanned face. My family has always judged me because I walked away from a prestigious medical school program 6 years ago. They told everyone in our social circle that I lacked discipline and focus. They branded me a failure from that day forward. They never bothered to learn that I left medicine because I discovered a brilliant, undeniable aptitude for coding and network security. While they were busy gossiping about my supposed downfall, I was spending sleepless nights building complex encryption algorithms. While my mother was complaining to her friends about my lack of ambition, I was securing digital infrastructures for clients who valued absolute discretion. They never bothered to ask what my little tech startup actually did. They just assumed it was some pathetic hobby meant to pass the time. In their shallow minds, because I was not wearing a white coat or working at a prominent Wall Street bank like Liam, I was utterly destitute and desperately in need of their pity. I looked from Liam to Nia, who was smirking triumphantly beside him, and finally to my mother, who gave a firm nod in agreement with Liam's blatant disrespect. They honestly believed this was their moment of absolute superiority. They thought this $5,000 check was the ultimate flex, the final proof that I was nothing without their charity. I slowly picked up the check, folding it neatly into a small, perfect square. I smoothed out the creases with my thumb, ensuring the gesture was as deliberate and calculated as Liam's had been. I tucked it into the pocket of my dress. "Thank you, Liam," I said, my voice completely smooth, calm, and entirely devoid of the anger they were trying so desperately to provoke. "Your incredible generosity is truly noted and appreciated. I am sure this money will be put to very good use." My husband Marcus stood next to me, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle ticked visibly in his cheek. I could see the fury radiating from him, ready to unleash on my family and throw them all out of our home. I gently placed a hand on his arm, giving it a reassuring squeeze to stop him. I did not need him to fight this particular battle tonight. I did not need to scream or defend my honor in front of these people. They wanted to play a ruthless game of money, status, and power. They wanted to humiliate me by parading their supposed wealth while treating me like a charity case. But they had absolutely no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea that I held the keys to the digital vault that housed all of their darkest, most destructive secrets. The real game had not even started yet, but I already knew exactly how it was going to end. The crisp edge of the folded check burned against the fabric of my pocket. The silence in the dining room was absolute, save for the soft jazz still playing through the ceiling speakers, a stark contrast to the heavy toxicity suffocating the space. Liam laughed, a harsh, grating sound that bounced off the floor-to-ceiling penthouse windows overlooking the city skyline. Look at her, Nia. She actually took it. He turned to the remaining guests, including my mother-in-law, Gloria, who sat silently with her arms crossed, and a few close friends who were too stunned to move. You see, pride is a luxury for those who can actually afford it, and clearly our dear Chloe cannot. Nia stepped up beside him, looping her slender arm through his. She adjusted her Cartier bracelet with a practiced flick of her wrist, ensuring the diamonds caught the ambient light from the chandelier. It is honestly for the best, Liam. She needs to face reality. Chloe, you cannot keep pretending that sitting at a computer all day in your sweatpants is a real career. Liam works 80 hours a week on Wall Street managing actual wealth. He handles investment portfolios larger than the GDP of small island nations. What do you manage? A few broken lines of code that no one will ever buy. Nia did not stop there. She stepped closer, her expensive perfume masking the scent of the roasted garlic from our dinner. I mean, Marcus must be absolutely exhausted. She continued, casting a faux sympathetic glance at my husband. Paying the mortgage on this penthouse, covering your endless business expenses, probably paying off those massive student loans you racked up before deciding medical school was just too hard for you. It is draining just thinking about it. You are pulling him down, Chloe. At least Maya had a real career trajectory before she left. I watched my sister's perfectly contoured face. She had spent her entire life mastering the art of the backhanded compliment, but tonight she was not even trying to hide the venom. She fed off Liam's financial dominance, using his bank account as a weapon to bludgeon anyone who dared to stand outside their narrow definition of success. My mother. Patricia stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the polished hardwood floor. She positioned herself right next to Liam, effectively choosing her side without a shred of hesitation. Nia is right, Chloe. You should be thanking Liam on your knees. He did not have to offer you a dime, but he is a generous man. A real man who understands family responsibility. Patricia sighed dramatically, swirling the remaining Chardonnay in her crystal glass. She looked at me not with a mother's love, but with the weary disappointment of a failed investment. I still lie awake at night, wondering where I went wrong with you. You had a guaranteed path to success. You were going to be a surgeon. You had the prestige, the respect, the stability handed to you on a silver platter. And you threw it all away to play games on a computer. Now look at you, reduced to accepting charity from your younger sister's husband just to keep the lights on. They are not just keeping the lights on, Patricia, Liam interjected, puffing out his chest. His overly tailored designer suit strained against his shoulders, a physical manifestation of his inflated ego. That $5,000 is a lifeline. I saw the market trends for these boutique tech startups. They are dropping like flies. Investors want hard assets, solid returns, tangible growth. They do not want some vague encryption service run by a college dropout. I give her company 6 months tops before it goes under completely and takes Marcus's credit score with it. Liam took a step closer to the table, lowering his voice into a patronizing register meant to mimic a seasoned mentor advising a foolish child. Consider this an intervention, Chloe. Close up shop. Liquidate whatever cheap servers you bought. Take my money, pay off your most aggressive creditors before they send collections after you, and apply for a basic administrative job. I might even be able to pull a few strings and get you a data entry position at my firm. The pay is entry level, but it is honest work. It is certainly better than draining your husband dry and embarrassing this family any further. I kept my facial muscles completely relaxed. I did not blink. I did not glare. I did not let a single ounce of the burning rage inside me show on my face. I simply observed the man standing before me. Liam thought he was a titan of industry. He thought his job at a mid-tier Wall Street investment firm made him untouchable. He believed his massive bonus checks and leased luxury cars gave him the right to dictate my worth. What Liam did not know was that my vague encryption service was currently the primary cybersecurity contractor for 3 of the largest decentralized finance exchanges in the world. He did not know that my company, which he assumed was operating out of a dusty garage, had recently secured a highly classified government contract to audit digital infrastructure vulnerabilities for federal banking systems. And most dangerously for him, Liam had absolutely no idea that 3 weeks ago, my elite team of engineers had been hired to conduct a sweeping forensic audit of a massive offshore holding company located in the Cayman Islands. During that supposedly routine security sweep, I had personally stumbled upon a series of heavily encrypted, off-the-books ledgers. It took me less than 48 hours to crack the encryption that Liam's subpar tech guys thought was impenetrable. What I found inside those digital ledgers was a terrifying labyrinth of illicit wire transfers, embezzled client funds, and highly illegal shell corporations designed to launder money. And the name attached to the primary offshore account pulling all the strings was Liam Bradley. The man throwing a $5,000 check at me out of misplaced pity was currently drowning in tens of millions of dollars of stolen money. He was heavily over-leveraged, desperately moving funds between ghost companies to cover his massive, catastrophic losses in the market. His entire life, the bespoke designer suits Nia's glittering diamond bracelets, the extravagant European vacations they flaunted daily on social media, was a hollow, fragile illusion built entirely on stolen cash. He was a walking felony, a financial house of cards waiting for the slightest breeze to collapse. And I was the one holding the match. "Are you even listening, Chloe?" Nia's voice shattered my internal calculations. She snapped her manicured fingers directly in front of my face. "Or did the realization of how pathetic your life is finally short-circuit your brain? Say thank you to my husband and apologize to Mom for your behavior." "I am listening to every single word, Nia," I replied, my voice smooth as glass, completely devoid of the tremor they so desperately wanted to hear. It is fascinating to hear Liam's perspective on financial stability and hard assets. Marcus finally stepped forward. The restraint he had shown until now vanished, replaced by a cold, radiating fury. He placed his body solidly between Liam and me, his height and broad shoulders instantly dwarfing the arrogant investment banker. "That is enough," Marcus said. His tone was not a shout, but a low, dangerous rumble that commanded absolute obedience. "You have completely overstayed your welcome." Liam puffed out his chest, trying to maintain his alpha male facade, but he took a small, involuntary step back under Marcus's intense glare. "I was just trying to help your wife, Marcus. Someone has to give her a reality check before she ruins both of your lives." "My wife does not need your help, Liam. Nor does she need your money," Marcus replied, his eyes locked onto Liam's with icy precision. "You are standing in our home, a penthouse we own outright without a mortgage. You are drinking our wine, eating our food, and insulting my wife under my roof. You will leave now, all three of you." Patricia gasped, clutching her chest as if she had been physically struck. "Marcus, how can you speak to us this way? We are family. We are just concerned about your future together." "You are guests who have crossed a line," Marcus corrected sharply, turning his unwavering glare to my mother. "And your concern is nothing but poorly disguised malice. The elevator is behind you. Use it." Nia grabbed Liam's arm, her face flushed with indignant rage. "Fine, we will leave. Come on, Mom. We do not need to stay where we are clearly not appreciated. Let them drown in their own delusions." Liam adjusted his jacket, trying to salvage the last shreds of his dignity. "You are making a massive mistake, Marcus. When her company officially goes bankrupt and takes your finances down with it, do not come crawling to my firm for a bailout. I will not save you." "Do not worry, Liam," I said quietly, speaking up just as he turned toward the grand hallway. "I promise you, I will never ask you for a bailout." They marched toward the front entrance, their steps heavy with misplaced righteous anger. I watched them go, feeling the folded check resting securely in my pocket. It felt incredibly light, almost weightless, much like Liam's actual net worth. They walked out of the penthouse believing they had utterly destroyed me. They believed they had established their absolute supremacy and put the failed medical dropout back in her place. I turned to Marcus, offering him a gentle, reassuring smile. He exhaled a long breath, the tension slowly leaving his broad shoulders. He reached out and pulled me into his arms, kissing the top of my head. "I am sorry they are like this." he whispered into my hair. I should have thrown them out the second Maya pulled her pathetic stunt with the wine. No, I replied softly, resting my head against his chest and listening to his steady heartbeat. Let them have their moment of victory. Let them think they won tonight. I reached into my pocket and touched the crisp paper again. Tomorrow I would frame that $5,000 check. I would hang it in my office as a daily reminder of their arrogance. And then I would make a single untraceable phone call to the Securities and Exchange Commission, attaching the decrypted ledgers to the tip. The trap was perfectly set, the evidence was gathered, and my family had just gleefully walked right into the center of their own destruction. The transition back to my mother's house felt like walking willingly into a freezing storm. Exactly 1 week had passed since Liam tossed that $5,000 check onto my dining table, an act of supreme disrespect that still hung heavily in the air between us. Marcus and I were pulling into the sweeping circular driveway of Patricia's sprawling suburban estate. The imposing brick facade loomed against the twilight, perfectly reflecting the cold, unyielding nature of the woman who owned it. This was the setting for the mandatory family dinner, a monthly ritual designed explicitly to serve as a stage for my mother to worship Liam's supposed financial genius, while simultaneously reminding me of my place. Entering the formal dining room was like stepping into an interrogation chamber. The heavy mahogany table stretched out endlessly beneath a massive crystal chandelier. My mother had orchestrated the seating arrangement with tactical precision. Liam was placed at the absolute center, commanding the room like a reigning monarch holding court with Nia pressed eagerly against his side. From my perspective at the far, shadowed end of the table, the lighting cast long, dominating silhouettes across their faces, making them appear unnaturally large and overpowering. They looked down on me from their self-constructed pedestal, completely unaware that the foundation supporting them was built on sand. Dinner was a lavish, overbearing display of excess. Patricia had hired a private chef to prepare a 5-course meal, ensuring every plate served as a testament to the lifestyle she believed her favorite daughter had rightfully earned. As the second course was cleared away, Liam made a great theatrical show of reaching for his wine glass. He deliberately shot his tailored left cuff back, exposing a thick, gleaming gold Rolex Daytona. The heavy metal caught the light from the chandelier, flashing brilliantly across the room and demanding everyone's immediate attention. My mother let out an instant gasp of manufactured awe. She dropped her silver fork, her eyes wide with unadulterated adoration. Liam is that new, oh, it is absolutely stunning. The craftsmanship is just breathtaking. Liam offered a practiced, modest smile that did not reach his eyes. Just a little gift to myself, Patricia. We closed a massive offshore project this week. Tens of millions in initial capital. The restructuring alone took months of aggressive negotiation, but the yield is going to be astronomical. I figured I earned a small reward for managing such a high-stakes portfolio. A small reward, Nia chimed in, resting her chin delicately on his shoulder. He is being humble, Mom. His firm is completely relying on him to manage their most exclusive international clients. They literally cannot function without him. He is moving capital across borders that most people cannot even comprehend. We are celebrating by taking a private jet to St. Bart's next month. You both deserve it, my mother practically purred. She leaned forward, entirely captivated by the illusion of their limitless wealth. It takes a brilliant mind to navigate Wall Street. You are a true provider, Liam, a man who understands how to build a legacy. It is so refreshing to see real ambition. She let the word ambition hang in the thick air of the dining room. Slowly, deliberately, she shifted her gaze from the golden boy at the center of the table down to where I sat. The warmth in her eyes vanished instantly, replaced by the chilling familiar judgment that had defined my entire existence in this family. I took a slow, measured sip of my sparkling water. I looked at the heavy gold watch on Liam's wrist. I knew exactly where the money for that timepiece had come from. I knew the exact offshore routing numbers, the dummy corporations in the Cayman Islands, and the falsified ledger entries that paid for his designer suit and his wife's luxury vacations. Hearing him brag about moving capital across borders was almost poetic. He was confessing to his crimes right at the dinner table, repackaging federal offenses as corporate victories. Actually, I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the thick atmosphere of self-congratulation, ambition comes in many forms. My firm just closed a major contract of our own this week. We secured a massive new client. It is going to require a complete expansion of my current team. I kept the details intentionally vague. I did not mention that the new client was a government regulatory agency, nor did I mention that the project involved tracking the very same offshore accounts Liam was currently bragging about. I simply wanted to see how long it would take for my mother to shut me down. I did not have to wait long. Patricia waved her hand sharply through the air, treating my announcement like a persistent, annoying insect. She did not even blink. Please, Chloe, do not interrupt Liam when he is talking about real business. We are not discussing your little computer club right now. It is not a computer club, Patricia, Marcus said. His voice was dangerously low. He set his wine glass down on the table with a firm, solid thud that made the crystal ring. Chloe's company just secured a highly competitive contract. It is a massive achievement. My mother let out a sharp, condescending sigh. She looked at Marcus with a mixture of pity and irritation. Marcus, you are a good husband for trying to defend her, but we all need to live in reality. Chloe dropped out of a prestigious medical program to sit in her pajamas and stare at a screen. Calling it a company does not make it one. We all know you carry the financial weight of this marriage. She turned her piercing gaze back to me. In fact, Chloe, since your business is clearly going nowhere, I have a practical suggestion. You should look into taking a professional receptionist course, a quick certification in basic office administration. I am sure if you actually apply yourself for once, Liam could find a place for you at his firm. He always needs people to manage his calendar, answer phone calls, and organize his files. It would get you out of the house and give you a taste of a real professional environment. The silence that followed was suffocating. Naya let out a short, mean laugh, covering her mouth with her linen napkin. Mom is right, Chloe, Nia added, her eyes gleaming with pure malice. Liam's current assistant is practically useless. If you learn how to route calls properly and order coffee without messing it up, he might even pay you above minimum wage. It is the least we can do to help you out, especially since Marcus looks so stressed these days. Liam leaned back in his chair, swirling his red wine with a look of supreme arrogance. He looked down the length of the table at me, savoring his absolute dominance. I do not normally hire college dropouts, Chloe. My firm has very strict standards, but for family I might be willing to make a rare exception. You would have to start at the absolute bottom, of course. Mailroom duties, fetching lunch, basic data entry, but it would be a steady paycheck. You could finally start paying Marcus back for everything he has wasted on your tech phase. Marcus gripped the edge of the heavy mahogany table. His knuckles turned completely white. I could see the muscles in his jaw ticking, a clear sign that he was seconds away from tearing Liam out of his chair and throwing him across the formal dining room. He had tolerated their disrespect for years, but the sheer cruelty of suggesting I become a coffee fetcher for a criminal was pushing him to his absolute limit. Underneath the table, I reached out and placed my hand firmly over his knee. I squeezed twice, a silent, urgent command to stay grounded. I did not need Marcus to defend my honor tonight. I did not need to scream or throw my wine or storm out of the house in tears. I looked at my mother. I looked at my sister basking in the glow of her husband's stolen wealth. I looked at Liam wearing his fraudulent Rolex like a crown. They were so utterly convinced of their superiority. They thought this dinner was a masterclass in putting me in my place. They thought they had finally broken me down, reducing me to a pathetic charity case desperate for their table scraps. I offered them a perfectly calm, unbothered smile. My composure was a fortress they could not breach. "Thank you for the advice, Mom," I said, keeping my tone remarkably pleasant. "And thank you, Liam, for the incredibly generous job offer. I will definitely keep your firm's current situation in mind." I took another bite of my dinner, chewing slowly and methodically. Let them enjoy their roasted lamb and their expensive wine. Let them revel in their imaginary kingdom. Because while Liam was busy bragging about his offshore accounts, my team was quietly handing over every single encrypted ledger to the federal authorities. The investigation was already active. The subpoenas were already being drafted. This suffocating dinner was not a display of their power, it was their farewell tour, and I was going to enjoy every single second of watching their empire burn to the ground. The sharp artificial glow of a smartphone screen sliced through the darkness, illuminating the smug satisfaction on Nia's face. Across the city, in a dimly lit cubicle at a second-rate financial advisory firm, Maya stared at her own monitor, her fingers flying across the keyboard with malicious intent. And in a high-rise office overlooking Wall Street, Liam checked his notifications, his lips curling into a predatory smile. If anyone had been standing in the room with them panning rapidly between their glowing screens, they would have witnessed the birth of a remarkably pathetic conspiracy. It was a digital alliance forged in the fires of bruised egos and sheer unadulterated jealousy. The three of them had formed a secret encrypted group chat, believing themselves to be brilliant tacticians orchestrating my ultimate downfall. They had severely underestimated the woman they were trying to destroy. Maya was still seething from the absolute humiliation she had endured at my anniversary dinner. The memory of the security footage playing her disastrous wine-spilling stunt on a loop for all my guests to see had driven her to a state of vindictive obsession. She wanted blood. Working as a junior analyst at a mid-tier financial firm gave her access to highly sensitive credit generation software, a tool she was currently weaponizing to exact her petty revenge. Through the lens of a hidden, silent observer, the entire scheme unfolded in real time. Maya sat alone in her cubicle long after her colleagues had gone home. She pulled up blank financial templates, credit reporting algorithms, and debt assessment forms. With deliberate, calculated keystrokes, she began to construct a masterpiece of absolute fiction. She did not just tweak a few numbers. She fabricated a complete catastrophic financial history under my name. She drafted fake notices of defaulted business loans, attributing massive high-interest debt to my tech startup. She manipulated credit reporting software to generate a fabricated credit score that sat squarely in the red zone of severe delinquency. To make the lie even more destructive, she meticulously wove Marcus's financial data into the forgery. She created counterfeit bank statements showing that I had been secretly siphoning thousands of dollars from his personal checking accounts to cover my tracks. She even generated a fraudulent pre-foreclosure warning on our penthouse, making it look as though I had leveraged our home to secure shadow loans that I was now failing to repay. When the fraudulent documents were perfectly polished, bearing all the official watermarks and institutional letterheads necessary to pass a casual inspection, Maya exported them into a single devastating PDF file. She dragged the file into the secret group chat, hitting send with a triumphant strike of the enter key. The chat instantly lit up. Naya was the first to respond, her messages appearing in rapid succession. She called Maya a genius, reveling in the sheer toxicity of the fabricated evidence. She typed furiously, outlining how this was the exact ammunition they needed to finally pry Marcus away from me. Liam chimed in a moment later, his digital tone dripping with unearned superiority. He praised Maya for her precise handiwork, declaring that the documents looked completely authentic. He promised to take the lead on the final phase of their operation, assuring the two women that he knew exactly how to present this information to maximize its destructive impact. Liam did not wait long to execute his part of the plan. The very next afternoon, he arrived at my mother's estate carrying a sleek black leather portfolio tucked under his arm. He strode into Patricia's private sunroom, presenting himself not as a manipulative conspirator, but as a deeply concerned son-in-law, carrying the heavy burden of terrible news. Patricia was sitting on a velvet chaise lounge, sipping her afternoon tea. Liam sat across from her, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees and looking at the floor with a masterfully performed expression of sorrow. He let out a long, heavy sigh, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, before finally meeting my mother's eyes. "Patricia," Liam began, his voice lowered to a tone of grave urgency, "I need to share something with you, something highly sensitive. I was conducting a routine background audit on some emerging tech sectors, just keeping an eye on the market, when my analysts flagged a series of highly alarming financial irregularities. I did not want to believe it at first. I tried to look the other way, But as a professional, and more importantly as a member of this family, I could not keep this to myself. My mother set her teacup down on the glass table, her posture instantly stiffening. The drama of the moment captivated her completely. Liam, what is it you are scaring me? Does this have to do with Marcus? It has to do with Chloe, Liam said, shaking his head as if the very mention of my name caused him physical pain. He unzipped the leather portfolio and slowly slid the stack of fabricated documents across the table. I am so sorry, Patricia. But Chloe is not just failing. She is actively destroying Marcus. These are pulled directly from verified credit bureaus and private lending networks. She has defaulted on nearly every line of credit she opened for that non-existent company of hers. Worse than that, she has been secretly draining Marcus's personal accounts to cover her tracks. Patricia snatched the documents from the table, her eyes darting across the fraudulent balance sheets, the fake overdue notices, and the fabricated pre-foreclosure warnings. As she read the lies Maya had so carefully constructed, her face flushed with a mixture of absolute horror and profound, undeniable vindication. This was exactly what she had always wanted to believe about me. She did not question the validity of the documents for a single second. She did not ask how Liam had legally obtained my private financial records. The papers validated her lifelong bias, confirming her deep-seated belief that I was nothing more than a parasitic failure. I knew it, Patricia gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. I knew she was dragging him down, but this is criminal, Liam. She is a gold digger. She is going to leave him completely bankrupt. We have to tell Marcus immediately. We have to show him these papers and force him to file for divorce before she takes the penthouse. Liam held up a hand, playing the role of the rational peacemaker. We have to be strategic, Patricia. If we just throw these in Marcus's face, he might get defensive. He loves her, and love makes men blind to reality. We need to stage a formal intervention. We need to gather the family, sit Marcus down, and present the evidence calmly. We have to show him that we are only doing this because we care about his financial future. Once he sees the raw data, he will have no choice but to kick her out. Patricia nodded vehemently, her eyes shining with the thrill of impending drama. You are right. You are absolutely right, Liam. You are so brilliant. Thank you for protecting this family. I will organize everything. We will host a private family meeting this weekend. Marcus will finally see her for the fraud she truly is. They sat in the sunroom, practically toasting to my impending destruction. They were completely intoxicated by their own brilliance. They thought their clandestine operation was flawless, a perfectly executed strike that would leave me homeless, divorced, and utterly disgraced. What they did not realize was that the concept of digital privacy does not apply when you are targeting a cybersecurity architect. I was not sitting idly by while they plotted my ruin. I was sitting in the center of my command center in the penthouse, surrounded by 4 curved monitors, watching their entire conspiracy unfold in high definition. The moment Maya had sent that PDF file to Liam, my network sniffers had intercepted the data packet. Because Liam had foolishly connected his personal phone to my penthouse Wi-Fi during the anniversary dinner weeks ago, I had already mapped his device's unique digital signature. When Maya, operating on an unsecured third-party server, transmitted the forged documents, my automated security protocols flagged the anomaly instantly. I did not just have copies of the fake credit reports. I had complete, unadulterated access to their entire group chat. I had the server logs showing the exact time and IP address where Maya had illegally manipulated the financial software. I had the digital footprint proving that Liam had knowingly downloaded and distributed fabricated documents with the explicit intent to cause personal and financial harm. They had quite literally handed me a neatly packaged, easily prosecutable case of criminal conspiracy, defamation, and corporate fraud. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, taking a sip of hot coffee as I read through the chat logs. The sheer hubris of their alliance was breathtaking. Maya was risking federal prison for falsifying financial records. Liam was risking his securities licenses by engaging in targeted fraud. And my mother and sister were eagerly complicit, blinded by their desperate need to see me fail. They wanted to stage an intervention. They wanted to corner Marcus, present their little stack of fake papers, and demand my exile. I smiled a slow, dangerous curve of my lips in the quiet glow of my monitors. I would let them have their family meeting. I would let them gather in Patricia's living room, lay out their fabricated evidence, and deliver their triumphant speeches. I would let them walk all the way to the edge of the cliff before I pushed them over. Because when I finally revealed the truth, I was not just going to clear my name. I was going to obliterate their entire world. The summons arrived early Saturday morning in the form of a brief, cold text message from Patricia, demanding that Marcus and I come to the estate immediately. She claimed it was a matter of absolute family urgency. As we pulled through the wrought iron gates and parked in the sprawling driveway, the oppressive weight of the impending confrontation settled over us. If this entire sequence had been captured on film, the lens would have been inherently unstable. It would have perfectly mimicked the frantic, unpredictable rhythm of a handheld camera, tracking our every step with a slight breathless shake to amplify the suffocating tension waiting for us inside those heavy oak doors. We were directed into the formal living room, a cavernous space, suffocated by antique furniture and Patricia's overwhelming need to project generational wealth. The staging of the room was deliberate, designed to resemble a tribunal. My mother sat rigidly in the center of her velvet sofa, acting as the presiding judge. Liam and Nia flanked her like loyal sentinels, armed and ready. And sitting quietly in the wingback chair in the darkest corner of the room, clutching a sleek black leather binder against her chest, was Maya. Seeing her sitting there was the final physical confirmation of the digital conspiracy I had already watched them plot on my monitors. "Sit down, Marcus," Patricia commanded the moment we crossed the threshold. She completely ignored my presence, focusing entirely on my husband. "Chloe, you can stand. You're going to want to be fully awake for this." Marcus did not sit. He remained standing right beside me, his physical presence serving as an unyielding wall between me and my family. He crossed his arms over his chest, his jaw set in a hard, uncompromising line. "Whatever you have to say, Patricia, you can say it while we stand. We do not plan on staying long." My mother's face flushed with a sudden vicious burst of anger. She reached out to Maya, snapping her fingers impatiently. Maya stood up, a terrifyingly smug smile spreading across her lips. The camera of my mind zoomed in tightly on that smile, capturing the raw, opportunistic greed of a woman who genuinely believed she was about to steal my life. Maya handed the black leather binder to Patricia, lingering just a second too long to ensure Marcus noticed her. Patricia ripped the binder open. With a theatrical, aggressive flourish, she pulled out a thick stack of printed papers and slapped them violently onto the glass coffee table. The sharp, cracking sound echoed off the high ceiling. Nia jolted at the sound, immediately initiating her performance. I watched in clinical fascination as my sister blinked rapidly, forcing a sudden sheen of moisture into her eyes. If a camera were lingering on her face in an extreme close-up, it would have captured the absolute artificiality of her manufactured tears. She dabbed at the corners of her eyes with her fingertips, playing the role of the deeply devastated sibling to absolute perfection. "Marcus, we brought you here because we love you." Patricia began, her voice trembling with weaponized sympathy. "We have always considered you a son. You are a brilliant, hard-working man, and it absolutely breaks my heart to see you being so ruthlessly exploited. This is the truth about the woman you married." Patricia pointed a trembling, manicured finger at the papers scattered across the glass. "Liam and Maya went out of their way to conduct a private financial audit to protect you. What they found is catastrophic. Chloe has defaulted on hundreds of thousands of dollars in shadow loans. Her so-called tech company is a black hole of debt. And worse, Marcus, she has been secretly siphoning money from your joint checking accounts to cover up her massive financial failures. She is preparing to leverage your penthouse into foreclosure. She is actively bleeding you dry." I stared down at the documents. They were the exact same forged credit reports, the exact same fabricated bank statements, and the exact same counterfeit foreclosure warnings I had watched Maya create on her unsecured work server days ago. They had printed them on high-quality paper, complete with fraudulent institutional watermarks, genuinely believing they had authored an inescapable trap. Nia let out a soft, dramatic sob. "We tried to warn you, Marcus. We really did. Chloe has always been a parasite. She could not handle medical school, and now she is trying to drag you down into her miserable failures. You have to save yourself before the banks come after your assets." Marcus did not even glance at the papers on the table. He did not look at the fake red numbers or the counterfeit bank seals. He kept his eyes locked dead on Patricia. The temperature in the room plummeted as his absolute stillness radiated a cold, dangerous fury. Before Marcus could speak, Liam stepped forward, taking control of the narrative he had so arrogantly orchestrated. He adjusted his tailored suit jacket, adopting the posture of a benevolent corporate savior, throwing a lifeline to a drowning man. "Look Marcus man to man," Liam said, his voice dripping with condescending authority. "You are chained to a sinking ship. But because you are family, I am willing to offer you a way out. I have significant influence at my firm. If you cut your losses right now, if you agree to file for a full divorce tomorrow and serve her with those papers, I will personally guarantee you an executive seat on my advisory board. We are talking about a massive starting salary, premium stock options, and real tangible power." Liam took a step closer, gesturing grandly toward the corner of the room where Maya was sitting. "You are a man who understands value, Marcus. You need a partner who actually comprehends wealth and financial growth. Maya is a certified analyst. She knows the market. She understands how to multiply capital, not destroy it. You drop the dead weight standing next to you, marry Maya, and join my board. Your entire financial future will be secured overnight." Maya shifted in her chair, lifting her chin to display herself to Marcus. The smug, predatory grin on her face was almost blinding. She was practically vibrating with anticipation, fully expecting my husband to look at the fake papers, look at me with disgust, and eagerly accept the illicit bargain they had placed in front of him. The silence that followed Liam's proposition was deafening. It was the sound of an absolute, unforgivable boundary being completely shattered. My mother had just explicitly endorsed a plan to bribe my husband into divorcing me and marrying another woman right in front of my face. Marcus uncrossed his arms. He did not yell. He did not scream or flip the glass table. His movements were slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly calm. He reached down and firmly wrapped his large hand around mine, his fingers intertwining with mine in a display of absolute, unbreakable solidarity. His grip was warm and solid, an instant anchor in the middle of their toxic storm. "You people are utterly delusional," Marcus said, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that cut straight through their arrogance. "You actually believe my loyalty is a commodity you can purchase with a fabricated board seat and a stack of printed lies." Patricia gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Marcus, the proof is right there on the table. You have to look at the numbers." "I do not need to look at anything," Marcus fired back, his eyes narrowing into a lethal glare. "I know exactly who my wife is. I know exactly what she does. And I know exactly what kind of vile, pathetic people I am looking at right now. You invited me into your home to offer me another woman while my wife is standing right next to me. You are not family, Patricia. You are a disease." Liam's face twisted in sudden defensive outrage. "I am offering you a multi-million-dollar future, you ungrateful fool. You are going to lose everything because you are too stubborn to accept reality." "The only person losing everything is you, Liam," Marcus replied with a chilling, knowing calmness. "You have absolutely no idea who you are dealing with." Marcus tightened his grip on my hand. He looked at Naya, who had instantly dropped her fake tears, her face now a mask of pure shock. He looked at Maya, whose smug smile had entirely evaporated, replaced by a sudden sickening realization that her master plan had completely failed. Finally, he looked at my mother with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Do not ever contact us again," Marcus stated. Without another word, he turned, pulling me gently with him. We walked away from their tribunal, our footsteps echoing loudly against the hardwood floor. The heavy oak front door clicked shut behind us, finalizing the separation. As we walked down the driveway toward our car, the cool afternoon air hitting my face, I felt a radical shift in the atmosphere. The line had been crossed. There was no going back, no maintaining the peace, no pretending we could ever be a family again. They had drawn the battle lines and fired the first shot. They had attempted to destroy my marriage, frame me for financial ruin, and orchestrate my complete isolation. I slid into the passenger seat, pulling my phone from my pocket. I looked at the digital copies of the heavily encrypted offshore ledgers containing all of Liam's illegal wire transfers, right alongside the server logs proving Maya had forged the credit reports. The war had officially begun, and they had absolutely no idea the level of catastrophic hellfire I was about to rain down upon them. The camera tracks sideways in a smooth, continuous glide. It moves past towering rows of black steel server racks, the steady hum of industrial cooling units vibrating through the floor. Thousands of tiny LED lights blink in rapid, chaotic sequences of sapphire blue and emerald green, illuminating the dark, climate-controlled room. The tracking shot comes to a deliberate halt, focusing on the massive curved monitor on my desk. Reflected in the pristine anti-glare glass is my face. My expression is razor-sharp, completely stripped of the polite, accommodating mask I wore at my mother's estate. The world believed Nia's narrative. My family genuinely thought I was a failed medical student who retreated into isolation to tinker with meaningless software leeching off my husband's success. They pictured me in sweatpants, typing out broken lines of code in a desperate attempt to feel productive. The reality was a closely guarded industry secret. I did not just run a tech startup. I was the founder and principal architect of an elite cybersecurity firm that catered exclusively to the top 1%. We did not build apps or design websites. We constructed impenetrable digital fortresses. My clients were international defense contractors, multinational conglomerates, and the ultra-wealthy individuals who required absolute ghost-level anonymity. I managed a team of the most ruthless white-hat hackers and forensic data analysts on the eastern seaboard. When billionaires suspected their assets were compromised, they did not call the police. They called me. And last week, my firm had secured the most lucrative and highly classified contract in our history. The board of directors at Vanguard Sterling, the massive Wall Street investment bank, where Liam served as a managing director, had quietly realized they had a severe internal hemorrhage. Millions of dollars in institutional capital were vanishing through microscopic loopholes in their trading algorithms. Fearing a public relations catastrophe that would tank their stock, the board completely bypassed their own internal IT department. They needed an external apex-level audit. They put out a blind bid to the top 3 cybersecurity firms in the nation. I won the bid. The irony was almost too potent to bear. While Liam stood in my mother's living room in his bespoke suit waving Maya's amateur digitally forged credit reports and demanding that Marcus divorce me, he was completely oblivious to the fact that his bosses had just handed me the master keys to his entire corporate kingdom. I had unfettered God-level access to Vanguard Sterling's mainframe. I could see every email Liam had ever sent, every trade he had ever executed, and every keystroke he made on his company-issued devices. I leaned forward, my fingers resting lightly on my mechanical keyboard. I brought up the secure encrypted portal that linked directly to Vanguard Sterling's central servers. A command prompt blinked steadily, waiting for my input. With a few rapid keystrokes, I initiated the deep dive protocol we had designed specifically for this operation. Lines of raw data began cascading down my monitors like a digital waterfall. My team had already spent the last 4 days mapping the bank's internal network architecture. Now it was time to extract the poison. I opened a secondary window, pulling up the decrypted offshore ledgers I had stumbled upon weeks ago. I began cross-referencing the shadow accounts in the Cayman Islands with Vanguard Sterling's official outgoing wire transfers. Liam thought he was a genius. He had used a highly sophisticated tumbling algorithm to slice the stolen money into microtransactions, bouncing them through dozens of shell companies in Eastern Europe before finally depositing them into his offshore accounts. To a standard auditor, it looked like routine market fluctuation and acceptable margin losses. To me, it looked like a glowing neon path leading directly to his doorstep. I isolated Liam's executive access credentials. I watched in real time as his digital footprint illuminated across the screen. I tracked the exact moments he logged into the system after hours manipulating client portfolios to skim fractions of percentages off high-yield trades. He was not just stealing from his firm, he was actively robbing the very clients he bragged about entertaining. I opened the chat logs my network sniffers had intercepted from his phone. I split the screen, placing Maya's pathetic, amateurish PDF forgery right next to Liam's actual heavily documented felonies. Maya had used a basic commercially available software patch to alter my credit score. It was a parlor trick, a childish prank executed by someone who fundamentally did not understand how digital architecture worked. Liam had taken that fake PDF and presented it as an absolute truth, staking his reputation on a lie that could be dismantled by a first-year computer science student. Meanwhile, I was compiling a 70-page forensic dossier that contained time-stamped IP addresses, unauthorized routing numbers, and definitive proof of massive corporate embezzlement. The discrepancy in our power was staggering. They were playing with plastic swords in a sandbox, completely unaware that I was sitting in a control room aiming a satellite-guided laser directly at their heads. I picked up my secure phone and hit a speed dial key. My lead forensic accountant, David, answered on the first ring. Status. I said, my eyes never leaving the cascading data on my screens. We have everything locked down, Chloe, David replied, his voice buzzing with professional adrenaline. The data extraction is 100% complete. We have successfully traced the missing capital back to 3 specific offshore accounts. The routing numbers match Liam Bradley's executive authorization codes perfectly. He used his personal administrative overrides to bypass the bank's secondary authentication protocols. Did you package the evidence for the board? It is compiled, encrypted, and ready for deployment. We are just waiting for your authorization to transmit the final dossier to Vanguard Sterling's Executive Oversight Committee. Hold the transmission. I ordered, my gaze shifting to a digital photograph of my family that Marcus had taken on my birthday last year. In the photo, Nia was smiling brightly, clutching Liam's arm, completely oblivious to the hollow nature of her luxury. My mother stood beside them, looking fiercely proud. Do not send anything to the board just yet. Holding, David confirmed without hesitation. What is the play? Liam is arrogant. He believes he is untouchable because he operates in the dark. If we simply hand this over to the board, they will handle it internally. They will force him to resign, quietly seize his assets to recoup their losses, and bury the scandal to protect their stock price. He will go to prison, but it will happen behind closed doors. That is not sufficient. I thought about the way Liam had stood in my penthouse throwing a check at me. I thought about the sheer disrespect radiating from my mother as she demanded Marcus leave me for Maya. They needed to experience the exact same public, inescapable humiliation they had tried to inflict upon me. I want you to prepare a secondary data package, David, I instructed, my voice dropping to a low, methodical cadence. Strip the proprietary bank client data to protect the innocent investors, but leave the embezzlement trail completely intact. I want a clear, undeniable line drawn from Vanguard Sterling's missing funds directly to Liam's luxury assets. His cars, the penthouse he bought for Nia, the St. Bart's vacation funds. Highlight every single stolen dollar. Done. Where is the secondary package going? Nowhere yet. Just keep it primed on a secure self-executing server. I am going to let Liam build his own gallows. He thinks he is orchestrating my financial ruin. I am going to let him bring his entire operation into the light. When he finally makes his move, we drop the hammer. I disconnected the call, placing the phone face down on the desk. The server room around me continued its steady, rhythmic hum. I looked back at the monitors, watching the undeniable proof of Liam's criminal empire securely locked within my databases. My family had declared war using fabricated evidence and cheap theatrical stunts. They thought they had the high ground, but I controlled the very ground they were standing on. They wanted a public execution, and I was more than happy to oblige. The trap was fully armed, the evidence was incontrovertible, and all I had to do now was wait for them to pull the trigger. The invisible eye of the narrative descended from the vaulted ceiling of the subterranean command center, gliding smoothly past towering columns of black steel and blinking server racks. The high-angle perspective dropped down into the heart of the operations floor, coming to rest precisely on me. I stood in the center of a circular array of glass desks, surrounded by 12 of the most brilliant white-hat hackers in the Western Hemisphere. The ambient light of 100 monitors cast a sharp, cold glow across my face. My team operated in absolute synchronized silence. The only sound was the rapid rhythmic clatter of mechanical keyboards and the deep industrial hum of the cooling units fighting the immense heat generated by our processing power. We were entirely submerged in Vanguard Sterling's digital ecosystem. David brought a new holographic projection to the central display monitor. Chloe, the automated AI diagnostic, just flagged a massive structural anomaly deep within the bank's legacy infrastructure. It is completely walled off from their standard auditing protocols. I stepped closer to the screen, my eyes scanning the dense blocks of hexadecimal code scrolling rapidly downward. I initiated our proprietary decryption sequence. The AI did not just read the data. It tore it apart, reverse engineering the heavily encrypted routing logic that someone had tried very hard to bury. As the encryption dissolved, the true architecture of Liam's financial operation laid itself bare. It was pathetic. Liam had spent years curating the persona of an untouchable Wall Street savant, a master of the universe who moved markets with a flick of his wrist. But staring at the raw, unfiltered data of his private ledgers, the illusion completely shattered. He was not a financial genius. He possessed no profound insight into global economics. He was just a common thief operating a digital shell game. He had established a complex network of ghost corporations registered in tax havens across the globe: Cyprus, the Isle of Man, and the British Virgin Islands. He generated thousands of fake consulting invoices billing Vanguard Sterling for phantom services. But the bank's internal revenue was only the surface layer of his operation. The deeper the AI dug, the darker the truth became. "Trace the source nodes," I commanded, my voice devoid of any emotion. "Where is the bulk of this liquidity originating?" David's fingers flew across his console. The data visualized on the main screen transforming into a glowing web of interconnected financial streams. The thickest, brightest lines were not coming from Vanguard Sterling's corporate accounts. They were being siphoned from the bottom tier of their asset management division. A cold, heavy knot formed in my stomach. Liam was not stealing from billionaire hedge fund managers or rival investment banks. He was actively draining the accounts of Vanguard Sterling's most vulnerable clients. He was targeting union pension funds, municipal retirement accounts, and the life savings of working-class families. He used an automated fractional skimming algorithm to shave pennies off of millions of daily transactions, siphoning the money out so slowly and methodically that the individual account holders would never notice the missing fractions. But those fractions compounded into tens of millions of dollars. He was bleeding the elderly dry to build his empire. "Run a full cross-reference on the disbursement accounts," I said, leaning my palms against the edge of the glass console. "Show me exactly where every single stolen dollar ended up." The AI processed the command instantly, linking the offshore shell companies directly to domestic spending accounts. The resulting list populated on the screen in a damning, irrefutable column of personal expenses. There was the $3 million penthouse Liam had purchased for Nia in the city, funded entirely by stolen pension money. There was the custom-ordered matte black Mercedes SUV Nia drove to her yoga classes, paid for with the retirement funds of public school teachers. The invoices rolled down the screen in a sickening display of gluttony. First-class flights to Paris and Milan, a $200,000 diamond tennis bracelet Nia had ostentatiously flaunted at our mother's Christmas dinner, the private yacht charters in St. Bart's, the vintage champagne they poured down their throats while looking down their noses at me. Every ounce of their curated superiority, every shred of the elite status they wielded like a weapon against the rest of the world was completely counterfeit. They were living like royalty on blood money. Nia had always paraded around my mother's estate, acting as though she had won the lottery of life through sheer merit and elevated taste. She looked at me with undisguised pity, genuinely believing her husband was a titan of industry, while mine was just a hard-working architect. She had no idea that the silk dresses she wore and the marble floors she walked on were financed by grand larceny. Or perhaps she did know, and she simply did not care so long as the funds never stopped flowing. My mother worshipped Liam. Patricia had spent years holding him up as the absolute gold standard of success, constantly comparing my perceived failures against his overwhelming wealth. She had eagerly conspired with him to destroy my marriage, believing that aligning herself with Liam's money would secure her own legacy. She had traded her own daughter for proximity to a thief who stole from the vulnerable. Package every single transaction, I told David. Match every stolen cent from the retirement funds to the exact luxury item Liam purchased. I want the receipts side by side. I want a direct visual correlation between a drained pension account and Nia's designer jewelry. Leave absolutely no room for interpretation or plausible deniability. It is already being processed. David confirmed, his eyes reflecting the blue light of the monitors. The secondary dossier is growing exponentially. Chloe, when the federal authorities see this, he is not just going to lose his job. This is federal racketeering, wire fraud, and grand larceny. He is looking at 2 decades in a federal penitentiary. He built the cage himself, I replied, watching the data continue to cascade. I am just making sure the door locks behind him. I stepped back from the console, the chaotic glow of the server room washing over me. The power dynamic had shifted so violently, it was almost disorienting. For years I had endured their passive-aggressive insults, their condescending advice, and their outright attempts to humiliate me. I had stayed silent to keep the peace, allowing them to believe their own delusions of grandeur. They thought I was weak. They thought Marcus and I were easy targets, stepping stones they could crush on their way to the top. They had no conception of the shadows I operated in or the sheer magnitude of the digital weaponry at my disposal. Liam had mistaken my silence for submission. He had severely underestimated the depth of my reach. He thought he was playing a high-stakes game of chess against a defenseless opponent. But the game had ended the moment his firm hired mine. He was already in checkmate. He just had not realized the board was flipped. The data extraction finished with a soft chiming alert from the primary terminal. The secondary dossier was fully compiled, a lethal weapon of pure, unadulterated truth, just waiting to be deployed. I authorized the final encryption lock, securing the evidence in an offline vault. The trap was set. Now it was time to orchestrate the grand finale. The cool, artificial blue light of the primary monitor reflected sharply in my eyes. If a camera were positioned just inches from my face in an extreme close-up, it would capture the rapid, erratic darting of my pupils as they tracked thousands of lines of encrypted code scrolling downward in a relentless vertical stream. The soft, rhythmic hum of the servers faded into the background, drowned out by the intense, hyper-focused quiet of my own mind. The primary extraction was complete, and David had successfully locked the main dossier in the offline vault. But a persistent nagging instinct kept my hands hovering over the mechanical keyboard. Liam was arrogant, but he was not stupid enough to operate a purely linear scheme. He was moving tens of millions of dollars in stolen pension funds. He could not simply wire that volume of capital from a ghost account in the Cayman Islands directly to a luxury car dealership in Manhattan without instantly triggering a catastrophic audit from the Internal Revenue Service. He needed a domestic washing machine. He needed a sophisticated high-volume method to clean the stolen capital before it ever touched his personal domestic accounts. "David," I said, breaking the silence of the command center without looking away from the scrolling data. "Keep the main vault locked, but open a sandbox environment for me on the secondary server. I want to isolate the repatriation phase of Liam's laundering cycle." "Opening the sandbox now," David replied instantly. "What are you looking for?" "The missing link," I murmured, my fingers flying across the keys to initiate a highly specialized tracing algorithm. "Watch the flow of the capital after it hits the offshore shell companies. He has to bring it back on shore to spend it. I want to see the exact mechanism he is using to legitimize the cash." I watched the screen intently as the artificial intelligence began to map the secondary financial streams. The data visualized into a complex, glowing web of interconnected nodes. I watched the stolen money bounce from the British Virgin Islands to Cyprus, tumbling through algorithms designed to obscure its origin. Then, the stream shifted. Instead of flowing toward Liam's personal asset portfolios or standard investment vehicles, the offshore accounts were funneling massive irregular capital injections into a single domestic holding company registered in Delaware. "Pull the corporate registry data on that Delaware entity," I ordered. Seconds later, the corporate profile populated on my right-hand monitor. The holding company was listed as a luxury retail conglomerate. Specifically, it served as the parent corporation for a rapidly expanding chain of ultra-high-end fashion boutiques scattered across the most expensive exclusive commercial districts in the city. I leaned closer to the screen, my eyes narrowing as I scanned their reported quarterly earnings. The boutiques were reporting staggering, almost statistically impossible monthly profits. They were claiming massive continuous cash sales of designer goods, imported leather, and bespoke jewelry. It was a textbook flawlessly executed money laundering front. They were intentionally inflating their daily retail sales numbers. By mixing Liam's stolen digitized pension funds with fabricated high-volume retail transactions they were making, the dirty offshore money appeared completely legitimate. They were paying taxes on the inflated income, effectively washing the stolen capital and turning it into clean, usable corporate profit. Bypass the Delaware corporate registry firewalls. I commanded, a cold thrill of anticipation settling in my chest. I do not want the shell directors. I want the actual unredacted articles of incorporation. Find out exactly who is signing the federal tax returns for this retail empire. The decryption software chewed through the bureaucratic firewalls in a matter of seconds. The protective corporate veil dissolved, revealing the true executive hierarchy of the holding company. A single name materialized on my screen in stark, undeniable white text. The sole managing director, the primary beneficiary, and the absolute legal owner of the holding company was Maya. The revelation struck with the force of a physical blow before immediately refining into absolute razor-sharp clarity. The chaotic puzzle pieces of the last few weeks violently snapped together, forming a picture so perfectly sinister it was almost poetic. Maya was not just a bitter, jealous junior analyst harboring a pathetic grudge over a spilled glass of wine. She was not just a petty woman seeking revenge because I had embarrassed her at an anniversary dinner. Maya was Liam's primary money launderer, her entire glamorous fashion boutique empire, the same empire she constantly bragged about. To my mother, was built exclusively on the backs of defrauded teachers and retired union workers. The dynamic of their alliance shifted instantly in my mind. The fake credit reports Maya had generated to frame me were not just an act of vindictive theater designed to impress Patricia. They were a calculated high-stakes favor for her criminal partner. Liam needed me out of the picture because my technical expertise posed a constant subconscious threat to his operation. He knew what I did for a living, even if the rest of the family dismissed it. He needed me discredited and isolated before I ever had a reason to look closely at his finances. Maya needed me destroyed to satisfy her own obsessive, deep-seated envy. They had joined forces, leveraging their mutual hatred for me to solidify their highly illegal partnership. Maya provided the clean capital for Liam. Liam provided the stolen funds to keep Maya's failing boutiques afloat. And Nia was the perfect clueless shield. My sister, parading around in her diamonds and her custom Mercedes, was nothing more than an extravagant distraction. She was the loud, flashy decoy that kept anyone from looking too closely at the dark mechanics of how her husband was actually funding her life. Nia believed she had married a titan of Wall Street. In reality, she had married a glorified thief, and she was wearing the spoils of his federal crimes on her wrists. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, the soft hum of the server arrays matching the steady, icy rhythm of my breathing. A slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. The sheer, breathtaking irony of the situation was almost suffocating. My mother had explicitly invited me to her estate to watch Maya and Liam orchestrate my ruin. Patricia had looked me in the eye and practically demanded that Marcus leave me for Maya, praising Maya as a beacon of financial brilliance and a superior partner. My mother had actively campaigned to replace me with a woman she believed represented the pinnacle of elite success. Instead, Patricia had inadvertently seated me across from an active, deeply compromised federal crime syndicate. Liam Maya, and by extension of her exorbitant spending, Nia were all inextricably tied together. They were sitting shoulder to shoulder on a ticking time bomb of federal indictments, massive wire fraud, corporate espionage, and severe undeniable money laundering charges. Their entire existence was a house of cards balanced on the edge of a razor. I reached out and tapped the communication key to David. "Update the secondary dossier," I said, my voice echoing with lethal finality in the command center. "Merge the retail holding company data with Liam's offshore extraction logs. I want Maya's name highlighted on every single fraudulent transaction. Tie her boutiques directly to the stolen pension funds. They wanted a family tribunal. We are going to give them a federal investigation." The camera pulls back, tracking my solitary figure as I move through the sterile subterranean corridors of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's regional field office. The lighting here is stark and unforgiving, a textbook example of chiaroscuro. Deep, impenetrable shadows cling to the corners of the concrete walls, while harsh, brilliant columns of white light slice through the darkness, illuminating my path. My footsteps echo in the absolute silence, steady and unyielding. I am not walking as a victim seeking rescue. I am walking as an architect of ruin, delivering the final devastating blueprint. I was escorted into a sensitive compartmented information facility, a soundproof lead-lined room designed to block all electronic surveillance. 3 men were waiting for me around a heavy stainless steel table. 2 of them were special agents from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, men with sharp eyes and perfectly tailored gray suits. The third man was Arthur Vance, the chief executive officer of Vanguard Sterling. He was Liam's supreme boss, a billionaire titan of Wall Street, who currently looked as though the air had been violently punched from his lungs. I did not sit down immediately. I walked to the head of the table, unzipped my leather portfolio, and pulled out a single heavily encrypted flash drive. I placed it perfectly in the center of the table. "Gentlemen," I began, my voice matching the cold clinical atmosphere of the room. "What you are about to look at is not a theory, it is not an accusation, it is a mathematical certainty. Vanguard Sterling has a catastrophic internal hemorrhage, and the man holding the scalpel is your managing director, Liam Bradley." Arthur Vance ran a trembling hand over his face. He looked at the drive as if it were an active explosive. "My internal security team assured me our mainframes were impenetrable. We hired your firm to conduct a routine stress test, Chloe. Are you telling me one of my top executives is actively robbing the bank?" "He is not robbing the bank, Arthur," I corrected him, leaning forward, resting my palms flat on the cold steel table. "He is robbing your clients. Specifically, he is targeting the bottom tier of your asset management division. He is using an automated fractional skimming algorithm to drain union pension funds and municipal retirement accounts. He is stealing the life savings of teachers, firefighters, and sanitation workers fractions of a cent at a time." The 2 FBI agents exchanged a sharp, charged look. Agent Miller, the senior of the 2, leaned forward. "Ms. Sterling, fractional skimming on that scale requires a massive, highly sophisticated laundering apparatus to repatriate the funds. Where is the money going?" I tapped the flash drive. "Liam is bouncing the capital through ghost accounts in Cyprus and the British Virgin Islands. But the domestic entry point is a Delaware holding company completely owned and operated by a junior financial analyst named Maya. She uses the stolen pension funds to artificially inflate the sales numbers of a chain of luxury fashion boutiques she controls. She washes the money, pays the taxes on the inflated revenue, and hands the clean cash right back to Liam." Arthur Vance turned entirely pale. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal was staggering. Liam was not just stealing money. He was weaponizing the pristine reputation of Vanguard Sterling to fund a federal crime syndicate. "We have been trying to map that specific offshore tumbling network for 8 months, Agent Hayes said, staring at me with a mixture of profound shock and deep professional respect. "The encryption protocols were military grade. How exactly did your team bypass their firewalls?" "I built better weapons," I replied simply. "Every IP address, every counterfeit invoice, and every unauthorized routing number is completely mapped out on that drive. You have a direct, undeniable line from a stolen public pension fund to the exact serial number of the matte black Mercedes SUV sitting in my sister's driveway." Arthur stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. He paced the length of the room, his fists clenched in a white-knuckle grip. I want him arrested today. I want federal marshals walking into his office, putting him in handcuffs, and marching him straight through the trading floor. I want him destroyed. No, Agent Miller interjected, his voice sharp and commanding. He stood up to face the CEO. If we move right now, we risk losing the offshore assets entirely. These syndicates employ automated deadman switches. If Liam's primary terminal goes dark unexpectedly, or if Maya's boutiques are raided by federal agents, the servers in Cyprus will instantly initiate a permanent wipe. The ledgers will vanish, the money will be permanently untraceable, and Liam's defense attorneys will tie this up in court for a decade. I nodded in agreement. Agent Miller is correct. Liam operates with extreme arrogance because he believes he is invisible. If you simply fire him or arrest him on a Tuesday afternoon, he will deny everything and claim his credentials were hacked. We need to catch him with his hands buried deep inside the vault. Agent Hayes turned his piercing gaze toward me. We need a live wire. We need to intercept a massive cross-border transfer the exact second he executes it. If we can capture the transaction in real time, bypassing his tumbling algorithms, it triggers the federal wire fraud statutes immediately. It is an undeniable, mandatory minimum federal offense. But to do that, we need someone on the inside. We need a digital tripwire embedded directly into his personal administrative terminal. The room went completely silent. The heavy pressurized air of the subterranean facility settled heavily on my shoulders. I knew exactly what they were asking me to do. My mother is hosting a formal family gathering this coming weekend, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Liam and Maya have orchestrated a massive campaign of financial forgery to frame me for fraud. They believe they have completely isolated me. They are planning to use this family meeting to demand that my husband divorce me and marry Maya. Arthur Vance looked physically ill. The personal cruelty woven into the corporate treason was almost impossible to process. Liam is drunk on his own hubris. I continued pacing slowly around the table. He wants to finalize his absolute dominance over our family. He is going to want to celebrate his victory. I guarantee you, while I am sitting in my mother's living room enduring their tribunal, Liam will open his laptop and execute a massive transfer to finalize his laundering cycle. He will want the thrill of stealing millions of dollars while looking me right in the eye. Can you plant the tripwire? Agent Miller asked, his voice dropping to a low, intense register. I already wrote the code, I replied. It is a localized tracking protocol. It sits completely dormant in Vanguard Sterling's mainframe until Liam inputs his biometric authorization. The second he hits enter on that transfer, my code will silently mirror the transaction directly to your federal servers. You will have the unredacted routing numbers before the money even reaches the Cayman Islands. Agent Hayes let out a slow, heavy breath. This means you cannot react, Chloe. You have to walk into that house and play the victim perfectly. You have to let them humiliate you. You have to look at your mother, your sister, and your husband and act like a woman who has completely lost the war. If Liam senses even a fraction of a percentage of defiance in you, he might delay the transfer. You have to swallow your pride and let them strike you down. I looked at the FBI agents, my expression devoid of fear or hesitation. The thought of standing in Patricia's living room, absorbing her venom, and listening to Liam's arrogant monologues would have broken me a month ago. But I was no longer the desperate daughter seeking her mother's approval. I was an apex predator patiently waiting for my prey to wander directly into the snare. They want to see me broken, I said, my voice echoing with a chilling, absolute certainty. I will give them the performance of a lifetime. Arthur Vance reached across the table, extending his hand. His eyes were hard, burning with the promise of corporate retribution. You deliver me the digital proof of that transfer, Chloe and I will personally ensure Liam Bradley never sees the outside of a federal penitentiary. I gripped his hand, the handshake sealing the silent, devastating pact. I shook hands with Agent Miller and Agent Hayes, finalizing the terms of the federal sting operation. The net had been cast. The invisible wires had been drawn taut across the entire landscape of their lives. As I walked out of the subterranean facility, stepping back out into the sharp, brilliant sunlight of the Manhattan skyline, A profound sense of calm washed over me. I was going to let them host their grand family intervention. I was going to let them gather in the estate, lay out their forged documents, and revel in their manufactured superiority. I would sit quietly in the corner playing the role of the defeated, humiliated parasite they always believed me to be. Because I knew something they did not. They were not hosting a victory celebration, they were hosting their own federal indictment. The atmosphere shifted violently from the sterile, fluorescent reality of the Federal Command Center to the biting, damp chill of late autumn descending upon my mother's historic estate. If a camera were capturing the scene, the frame would physically tilt a jarring off-balance angle that perfectly mirrored the moral rot seeping into the very foundation of the property. The visual distortion would capture the sickening reality of what was about to transpire beneath the vaulted ceilings of the home my grandfather had built. Liam's custom Mercedes tore up the long manicured gravel driveway, taking the final curve far too aggressively. He gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles. Beneath the bespoke Italian wool of his tailored suit, he was sweating profusely. The carefully curated facade of the untouchable Wall Street titan was beginning to fracture. He was running out of time. The internal automated auditing systems at Vanguard Sterling had been acting increasingly erratic over the past 48 hours. Liam did not know about my decryption algorithms or the FBI tripwire, but his survival instincts were screaming that a systemic review was imminent. He had a massive, glaring gap in his domestic ledgers. Maya's luxury boutique laundering operation had reached its absolute volume limit. Pushing even $1 more million through her fraudulent retail registers would automatically trigger an alert with the Internal Revenue Service. Liam needed an immediate massive injection of completely clean, highly documented domestic capital to plug the hole in his accounts before the quarterly review closed. He was a desperate, cornered animal, and he had come to the one place where he knew the prey would willingly walk into the slaughterhouse. The ancestral estate was a sprawling, ivy-covered stone mansion sitting on prime, irreplaceable acreage. It had been in our family for 3 generations. It was entirely paid off, carrying 0 debt. To Liam, it was not a home filled with history and memories. It was a dormant gold mine, a massive chunk of liquid equity just waiting to be extracted. Patricia greeted him at the heavy oak front doors with open arms and a delighted smile. To her, Liam could do no wrong. He was the golden son-in-law, the embodiment of elite success, the man who had elevated her social standing by simply marrying into the family. She ushered him into the formal sitting room, completely oblivious to the predatory gleam in his eyes. Liam did not waste time. He played his role with the terrifying ease of a seasoned sociopath. He opened a bottle of vintage Bordeaux he had brought from his private cellar, pouring her a generous glass. He sat close to her on the antique sofa, leaning in and speaking in low, confidential tones. He manufactured an artificial bubble of absolute exclusivity, making Patricia feel as though she was being welcomed into the inner sanctum of the global elite. He fabricated a masterpiece of financial deception. He told her about a restricted, closed-door commercial real estate acquisition. A private syndicate of international billionaires was buying up undervalued waterfront commercial zones for a massive tech hub redevelopment. It was an invitation-only opportunity, completely closed to the general public. But he claimed, leveraging his status as a managing director, he had managed to secure a single, highly restricted allocation specifically for his family. He looked her dead in the eye and promised a guaranteed 300% return on investment within 6 months. He painted a vivid, intoxicating picture of generational wealth. He told her this single investment would elevate her from merely comfortable to absolute untouchable dynasty status. She would eclipse every single woman in her country club. Patricia swallowed the lie like a starving woman. Her eyes widened with greed and unadulterated vanity. She hung on his every word, her posture leaning toward him in complete submission to his perceived financial genius. Then Liam set the hook. He explained that entering the billionaire syndicate required an immediate massive proof of liquidity. The funds had to be wired by the end of the week. He smoothly suggested leveraging the estate. He called it a temporary bridge loan, a completely standard routine practice among the ultra-rich. He assured her that wealthy people never let their assets sit idle. They made their bricks and mortar work for them. He promised that the estate would be completely cleared of the temporary debt the moment the 300% return paid out in the next quarter. Patricia hesitated for only a fraction of a second. The house was her most prized possession, the anchor of our family history. But her obsession with status and her blind, unwavering worship of Liam overpowered any shred of common sense. She viewed his expensive suit, his confident posture, and his Wall Street pedigree as infallible proof of his honesty. She believed him implicitly because he represented the elite white-collar world she so desperately craved to dominate. Liam produced a thick, leather-bound portfolio from his briefcase. He placed it on the antique coffee table between them. The documents inside were dense, printed on heavy stock paper, and filled with impenetrable labyrinthine legal jargon. He casually flipped past pages of dense clauses directly to the signature lines, offering her his heavy gold fountain pen. He did not tell her that the documents had absolutely nothing to do with a bridge loan or a real estate syndicate. He did not tell her that the paperwork had been drafted by a corrupt shadow attorney on his payroll. The documents were an irrevocable transfer of the property deed. By signing the papers, Patricia was not taking out a loan. She was executing a direct unilateral sale of the entire estate to one of Liam's domestic shell companies at a fraction of its actual market value. The shell company would immediately leverage the newly acquired deed to take out a massive, entirely legal commercial loan, providing Liam with the clean cash he desperately needed to hide his embezzlement. When Liam inevitably defaulted on that loan, the bank would foreclose on the property. Patricia would be thrown out onto the street completely penniless and legally stripped of her home. Liam pointed to the bottom of the page, his voice smooth and encouraging. Patricia did not ask to read the clauses. She did not request to have her personal family attorney review the contract. Blinded by her arrogance and her desperate need to feel superior, she simply smiled. She raised her glass of Bordeaux, toasting to their impending limitless wealth. She took the gold pen and signed her name with a dramatic flourish. She flipped to the next page and signed again. She initialed the margins, cheerfully handing over the legacy of our ancestors without a single passing thought of consequence. Liam carefully gathered the documents, ensuring the ink was dry before sliding them back into his leather portfolio. He snapped the briefcase shut, the sharp metallic click echoing loudly in the quiet sitting room. He smiled at my mother, thanking her for her trust while his mind was already calculating the immediate wire transfer. He had secured his lifeline. He had stolen my mother's entire net worth while sitting on her own sofa drinking her wine. As Liam walked out the front door, slipping back into his sleek luxury car to speed back toward the city, Patricia stood by the window watching him leave with an expression of absolute blissful triumph. She genuinely believed she had just secured her place among the financial royalty of the world. She had no idea she had just signed her own financial death warrant. The visual frame split perfectly down the middle, creating a stark, jarring contrast between two entirely different realities. On the left side of the screen, the camera held a tight, unyielding focus on my face. I sat in the subterranean command center, bathed in the sharp, icy blue light of my monitor arrays. The shadows around me were deep and absolute, a perfect chiaroscuro effect that highlighted the cold, calculated stillness in my eyes. I was surrounded by the silent processing power of a digital predator. On the right side of the screen, the aesthetic shifted violently to warm golden hues and overexposed brightness. Naya and Maya were lounging on the plush, cream-colored sectional sofa inside Nia's penthouse. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind them showcased the sprawling Manhattan skyline. They were draped in silk designer robes, holding crystal flutes filled with vintage champagne. The ambient lighting in the penthouse was carefully curated to project warmth and elite comfort. But through the lens of the video call, it only illuminated their profound, sickening arrogance. The incoming video call from Nia had flashed across my secure terminal. I had let it ring 3 times, allowing the recording software to fully initialize and route a direct encrypted audio feed straight to Agent Miller's secure server at the FBI field office. Every word they were about to speak would become federally cataloged evidence, I accepted the connection. My face appeared on their screen, an image of careful, deliberate exhaustion. I dropped my shoulders slightly, softening my jawline to project the exact image of a defeated, isolated woman that they desperately wanted to see. Maya leaned into the camera frame, first swirling the champagne in her glass. A vicious, triumphant smirk stretched across her perfectly painted lips. "Look who decided to answer," Maya purred, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness and genuine malice. "We honestly thought you might be too busy clipping coupons with Marcus in your little suburban kitchen to take a call from the city. Are you doing well, Chloe? You look terribly tired." I maintained my stoic expression, keeping my voice low and entirely devoid of energy. "What do you want, Maya?" Nia laughed, a sharp, grating sound that echoed off the high ceilings of her stolen penthouse. She slid closer to Maya, resting her chin on her hand, looking at me through the camera lens as if she were inspecting a caged animal. "We are just calling to give you a reality check," Nia said, taking a slow sip from her flute. "A family update, if you will. Liam just left Mom's estate. She is so incredibly happy, Chloe. He presented her with an investment opportunity that is going to elevate our family to a level you cannot even comprehend. She finally realizes who the true visionary in this family is. She sees exactly who brings value and who is nothing more than dead weight." The sheer, breathtaking irony of her words almost broke my concentration. Nia was bragging about Liam bankrupting our mother. She was raising a glass of champagne to celebrate the absolute destruction of our family's legacy, entirely unaware that the investment she was boasting about was a fraudulent scheme designed to cover up a federal crime. I dug my fingernails into the palm of my hand under the glass desk, using the sharp physical pain to suppress the urge to smile. I had to let them hang themselves. "Mom has always favored Liam," I replied softly, injecting just enough hurt into my tone to make it believable. "That is not exactly new information, Nia. Why are you calling me?" Maya took over the conversation, her eyes locking onto mine with predatory intensity. "Because the dynamic has permanently shifted, Chloe. We are not just the favorites anymore. We are the architects of this family's future. You chose to marry a mediocre architect who builds modest little houses. You chose a quiet, irrelevant life. You have Marcus, and that is very sweet. But we have the capital, we have the elite connections. We have the absolute backing of Patricia. We hold every single card on the board." Maya leaned closer to the camera, her voice dropping into a menacing theatrical whisper. "Eventually, your stubbornness is going to leave you completely isolated. When the dust settles, you and Marcus will be standing on the street with absolutely nothing watching us govern this family from the top floor." I let a heavy, prolonged silence stretch across the digital connection. The quiet forced them to lean in further, desperate to see the impact of their psychological warfare. "You did not call just to gloat," I stated, keeping my gaze fixed on the camera lens. "You want something." Naya exchanged a knowing, conspiratorial glance with Maya. They were drunk on their perceived power, utterly convinced they had me cornered. Naya set her champagne flute down on the marble coffee table, her expression hardening into absolute ruthlessness. "Mom is updating the family trust tomorrow morning," Nia announced, her tone icy and authoritative. "She is so disgusted by your lack of ambition and your refusal to embrace Liam's financial guidance that she is ready to remove your name entirely. She is going to cut you out of the will, Chloe. Every asset, the estate, the liquid capital, everything will be divided exclusively between me and Maya. You will be legally and financially severed from this family." I forced my breathing to remain shallow, projecting panic. "She would not do that. She would not disinherit her own daughter." "She already made the decision," Maya interjected sharply. "Liam helped her draft the paperwork this afternoon. You are a disappointment to her, Chloe. You are a liability to the family brand. But because we are generous, and because Nia still harbors a shred of pity for her sister, we convinced Mom to hold off on signing the final execution order. We negotiated a lifeline for you." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding with a dark, exhilarating rhythm. They were crossing the line from psychological cruelty into documented criminal extortion. "What kind of lifeline?" Maya smiled, revealing her teeth. "A show of good faith. A demonstration that you are finally ready to contribute value to this family instead of just draining its patience. You own a cybersecurity firm. It is a modest little tech startup, but Liam reviewed your corporate structure and believes it has a tiny fraction of potential. Maya paused, letting the silence hang to maximize her leverage. We will convince Mom to keep your name on the family trust. We will ensure you are not thrown out onto the street. In exchange, you are going to transfer 10% of your company's voting shares directly into my retail holding company. You sign over the equity and we let you keep your seat at the family table. The audacity was genuinely staggering. They were not just content with stealing my mother's house and laundering stolen pension funds. They wanted to force their dirty money into my legitimate corporate infrastructure. Maya wanted a piece of Vanguard Sterling's primary auditing firm, completely oblivious to the fact that my company was currently the very weapon being used to build her federal indictment. They thought they were executing a brilliant corporate takeover. They were actually handing the FBI a recorded time-stamped attempt at corporate extortion. You want 10% of my company? I said, my voice barely above a whisper, perfectly mimicking the tone of a woman realizing she has lost everything. You are holding my inheritance hostage for equity. We are offering you a business transaction, Nia corrected, smoothly picking her champagne back up. You give Maya the shares and we protect your inheritance. If you refuse, Mom signs the updated will tomorrow at noon. You get nothing. Marcus gets nothing. You will be entirely cut off. You have until tomorrow morning to draft the transfer documents. Maya added, her eyes flashing with triumphant malice. Do not try to negotiate. Do not call Mom to beg. You deal exclusively with us. Decide what your future is worth, Chloe. I sat in the cold blue light of the server room. The recording icon blinked steadily on my secondary monitor. I had every single word locked in the federal vault. I had given them exactly the reaction they craved, and they had rewarded me with the final nail in their own coffin. I looked at the split screen. I looked at their smug, smiling faces, their designer robes, and the glittering skyline behind them. I absorbed their cruelty, letting it wash over me and dissipate into the digital void. I leaned toward the camera, my expression perfectly smooth, my voice dropping the facade of defeat and settling into a tone of absolute chilling indifference. Do whatever you think is right. I severed the connection immediately. The right side of the monitor went completely black, cutting off their startled expressions in a fraction of a second. I sat back in my chair, the silence of the command center rushing back in to fill the void. I reached out and tapped the communication key to David, my eyes fixed on the blank screen. The extortion attempt was secured. The trap was locked. It was time to close the jaws. The right side of the monitor going black was the starting gun. The camera, if one were filming this sequence, would lose the smooth cinematic glide it had before. It would switch to a handheld documentary style, snapping frantically from my face to the monitors, catching the aggressive staccato clicks of my mouse. Every movement in the command center accelerated. Friday morning broke without a ray of sunlight reaching our subterranean floor, but the glow from the central monitors shifted from a cool blue to a pulsing, urgent amber. The 60-hour countdown had expired. Liam had officially panicked. He is moving the capital, David announced, his voice slicing through the industrial hum of the server racks. We have a massive liquidity event initiating from Vanguard Sterling's primary holding accounts. I pushed my chair back, stepping into the center of the circular array. My eyes darted across the cascading data streams. The biometric tripwire I had embedded in Liam's personal administrative terminal had just been triggered. He had logged in. He had bypassed the standard dual-factor authentication, using his executive override, and he was executing the transfer. Track it. I ordered, my eyes locked on the primary display. Do not let a single cent out of our sight. The visual representation of Liam's financial network erupted into life. We watched in real time as $25 million was forcefully extracted from the bank's domestic reserves. He was not skimming fractions of pennies anymore. He was taking a sledgehammer to the vault. The desperation was palpable in the raw data. He needed to cover the auditing gap before the weekend closed, and he was moving the stolen money with reckless speed. The funds are fragmenting, David called out, his hands flying across his mechanical keyboard. He is routing the 25 million through the Cayman Islands, splitting it into 50 separate microtransactions to avoid federal flags. Let him, I replied, watching the glowing red lines of the data transfer bounce across the global map projected on the main screen. The FBI algorithms are mirroring every single hop. Where is the secondary injection coming from? A new alert flared on my left-hand monitor. The system had detected a massive unilateral liquidation of an asset completely unrelated to Vanguard Sterling. It was Patricia's estate. The paperwork Liam had tricked her into signing had been processed by his corrupt attorney. The historic mansion, the property that had been in our family for 3 generations, had been officially transferred to a shell company. The shell company had immediately leveraged the deed, securing a $10 million commercial loan. The estate funds are moving. David confirmed, his tone grim. $10 million just hit a holding account in Delaware. It is merging with the offshore funds. I watched the two streams of capital collide. The stolen pension money and the liquidated equity of my mother's home fused together into a single massive toxic asset. Patricia had effectively financed the laundering of Liam's stolen money. She had handed him the very rope he was using to hang them all. Where is the final destination? I asked, though I already knew the answer. It is hitting the washing machine, David said, pulling up a new window. $35 million is currently flooding into the corporate accounts of Maya's retail conglomerate. They are logging it as an unprecedented record-breaking quarter of international bulk sales. The money is officially onshore and clean. The red alarms on my central console ceased their frantic flashing, settling into a solid, condemning crimson. The wire transfer was complete. The money had landed. The crime was no longer a theoretical projection. It was a fully executed, federally documented reality. My secure comms line chirped. It was a direct encrypted link to the FBI field office. I tapped the receiver. We have it. Agent Miller's voice came through the speaker, tight with adrenaline and absolute certainty. The tracking protocol worked perfectly. We intercepted the routing numbers before the encryption algorithms could scramble the origin points. We have the exact digital fingerprint of Liam Bradley initiating the transfer, and we have the destination accounts firmly tied to Maya. You have the estate transfer as well, I asked, keeping my voice utterly level. We captured the entire sequence. Agent Hayes added, his voice joining the line. The commercial loan taken out against your mother's property was used directly to facilitate the laundering of stolen federal pension funds. That makes the estate a piece of criminal evidence. We are freezing the Delaware holding accounts right now. The money is locked. Maya and Liam cannot move a single dollar out of that retail front. The finality of those words hung in the air. The trap had not just snapped shut, it had completely immobilized them. Are your strike teams positioned? I asked, moving back to my desk to finalize the localized data extraction. We have tactical units standing by in staging areas 3 miles from the estate, Agent Miller confirmed. We also have teams preparing to raid the Vanguard Sterling offices and Maya's primary retail locations simultaneously. We are just waiting for your signal. You have the floor, Chloe. You control the timeline. The family dinner is scheduled for tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock, I instructed. They have summoned me to the estate to sign over 10% of my company to Maya under the threat of disinheritance. They are going to lay their forged documents on the table and demand my absolute surrender. And when do we move in? Agent Hayes asked. I will wear a localized audio transmitter disguised as a lapel pin. I told them, my eyes fixed on the frozen crimson data on my screen. You will have a live feed of the entire conversation. You do not move until they explicitly present the forged equity transfer documents and attempt to coerce my signature. I want them on tape committing active corporate extortion to accompany the wire fraud charges. The moment Maya demands the shares, I will give you the verbal confirmation code. Understood, Miller replied. We will breach the perimeter on your mark. Be careful, Chloe. Desperate people behave unpredictably when cornered. They are not cornered yet, I said softly. They still think they are the ones building the cage. I severed the encrypted line with the FBI. The command center felt different now. The frantic, pulse-pounding urgency of the data chase had evaporated, replaced by a cold, heavy stillness. The hacking was over. The digital warfare had concluded in an absolute, undisputed victory. Now all that remained was the physical confrontation. I turned to David, pulling a sleek titanium flash drive from my pocket. Compile the final presentation. I want the Vanguard Sterling ledger discrepancies, the offshore routing logs, Maya's retail holding company tax filings, and the final deed transfer of my mother's estate. Put it all into a single, aggressively simple visual sequence. No complex code. I want pie charts and bank statements. I want it so undeniably clear that even my mother cannot feign ignorance. David took the drive, his expression somber. It is going to be brutal, Chloe. When they see this. When Patricia realizes what Liam actually did to her home. It is necessary, I replied, my voice steady. My mother spent my entire life teaching me that loyalty is transactional and that wealth is the only true measure of a person's worth. She chose to align herself with Liam because he presented the illusion of infinite wealth. Tomorrow night she gets to see exactly what that illusion cost her. She traded her daughter for a thief. She needs to look at the receipts. I walked back to my terminal, running a final diagnostic check on the audio transmitter I would be wearing. It was a tiny, imperceptible piece of hardware perfectly designed to broadcast crisp, high-definition audio straight to the tactical vans waiting in the dark outside the estate. The FBI agents would be listening to every insult, every threat, every arrogant boast. Liam and Maya were going to outline their own prosecution strategy, completely unaware that their words were being transcribed onto federal warrants in real time. The countdown had officially begun. The 60 hours of frantic data collection had compressed into 24 hours of absolute silence. Friday bled into Friday night. The command center slowly powered down the team, logging off one by one, leaving me alone with the quiet hum of the cooling systems. I did not feel fear. I did not feel the crushing anxiety that used to paralyze me before family events. I felt a terrifying, absolute clarity. Tomorrow night, I would walk into my mother's house wearing the very dress she had always criticized, accompanied by the husband they all looked down upon. I would sit at the antique dining table where I had endured decades of subtle insults and blatant favoritism. I would look at Nia's diamonds purchased with stolen retirement funds. I would look at Maya's smug, triumphant smile funded by fraudulent retail sales. I would look at Liam's tailored suit bought with the blood of working-class families. And I would look at my mother, who had willingly traded my future to bask in the glow of counterfeit wealth. They had demanded a family gathering to witness my final defeat. They wanted an audience for my humiliation. I was going to give them an audience. I was going to bring the full, unrelenting weight of the federal government crashing down through their front door. I reached down and powered off the primary monitor. The screen went black, casting my reflection in the dark glass. I did not look like the scapegoat they thought I was. I looked exactly like the storm that was coming for them. The wide panoramic shot opens on the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel, completely transformed for the Vanguard Sterling Annual Philanthropic Gala. A slow, deliberate dolly movement weaves through a sea of Manhattan's absolute elite. The air is thick with the scent of white lilies, expensive French perfume, and the quiet, pervasive arrogance of generational wealth. Waitstaff in crisp white coats glide effortlessly between tables, carrying silver trays laden with beluga caviar and vintage Dom Perignon. This is the premier charity event of the financial season, but tonight it serves a secondary, far more sinister purpose. It is Liam Bradley's coronation. At the absolute center of the room, elevated slightly above the rest of the attendees, sits the primary VIP table. My mother Patricia is holding court. She is draped in a custom-fitted emerald gown, her neck heavy with a diamond collar that I know for a fact was purchased on credit just 3 days ago. She is glowing with manufactured pride, absorbing the envious glances of the other socialites. Flanking her are Nia and Maya, shimmering in metallic couture, projecting the image of untouchable heiresses. They look at the crowd with predatory satisfaction, utterly convinced that their newly acquired fraudulent wealth has permanently secured their place at the apex of society. I sat at the far end of the same table, perfectly still. I was wearing a simple, impeccably tailored black silk dress, devoid of the flashy, desperate ornamentation my family was currently parading. Marcus sat beside me, his hand resting warmly over mine, under the heavy linen tablecloth. He wore a classic tuxedo, looking far more composed and dignified than the Wall Street predators circling the room. He did not know the full classified extent of the federal sting operation, but he knew enough to understand that tonight was the end of the line. He gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, a silent anchor in a room full of vipers. Pinned discreetly to the sheer fabric near my collarbone was a tiny pearl-encrusted brooch. It was not a piece of family jewelry. It was a military-grade audio transmitter broadcasting a live, unredacted feed directly to the mobile Federal Command Center, currently parked in a loading dock 2 blocks away. The low murmur of the ballroom fell completely silent as the heavy crystal chandeliers dimmed. A single brilliant spotlight pierced the darkness, illuminating the grand podium at the front of the stage. Liam stepped into the light. He looked like a man who had just conquered the world. He wore a bespoke velvet dinner jacket, his posture radiating a toxic, overwhelming confidence. He had spent the last 24 hours believing he had successfully laundered $35 million, saved his career, and secured complete financial dominance over my family. He stepped up to the microphone, raising a crystal flute of champagne. The crowd offered a respectful, deferential round of applause. Liam began his speech with the practiced, nauseating charm of a corporate sociopath. He spoke passionately about Vanguard Sterling's commitment to community growth, utilizing buzzwords like synergistic philanthropy and wealth empowerment. He thanked the billionaires and politicians in the room, seamlessly weaving his own name into the fabric of their elite circles. Patricia watched him with an expression of pure, unadulterated worship, her eyes glistening with tears of vanity. Then Liam's gaze drifted down from the crowd and locked directly onto me. The charming, philanthropic smile hardened into something infinitely more vicious. He was ready to deliver the killing blow to finalize the psychological destruction of the sister-in-law who had dared to stand outside his sphere of influence. "Tonight is about elevating those around us," Liam projected into the microphone, his voice echoing cleanly through the massive ballroom. "It is about recognizing that success is not merely earned, but engineered. But we must also acknowledge a difficult truth. No matter how much you build, no matter how much capital you generate, you cannot force everyone to rise with you. Sometimes, even within our own families, there are individuals who simply refuse to grasp the vision." A low, uncomfortable murmur rippled through the tables closest to the stage. Liam did not break eye contact with me. He leaned closer to the microphone, his tone shifting from inspirational to a sharp, weaponized condescension. "It is a tragedy of wasted potential," he continued, ensuring every single guest in the ballroom was hanging on his next word. "We all have that one relative, the one who rejects guidance, who flounders in mediocrity, while the rest of the family ascends. They cling to small, irrelevant lives, dragging their feet while the architects of the future build empires around them." Nia and Maya were openly smirking now, exchanging delighted glances. Patricia lifted her chin, looking at me with an expression of profound public disappointment, entirely validating Liam's cruel narrative. "But true philanthropy begins at home," Liam announced, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. He gestured broadly toward our table, explicitly directing the spotlight of public scrutiny onto me and Marcus. "We must extend a hand to those who have failed to secure their own future, so I want to make a public pledge tonight. If my sister-in-law Chloe ever finds herself overwhelmed by the consequences of her lack of ambition, if she and her husband require a modest entry-level position, perhaps a switchboard operator or a filing clerk to manage their mounting debts, the doors of Vanguard Sterling's lower administrative divisions will always remain open to her." A beat of stunned silence swept over the room, instantly followed by a wave of laughter. It was a cold, cruel sound. Hundreds of wealthy executives, socialites, and investors chuckled at the brutal surgical humiliation of a woman they did not even know. The laughter cascaded through the ballroom, a physical manifestation of Liam's absolute dominance. He raised his glass to me, a mocking salute to my engineered destruction, before taking a slow, victorious sip of his champagne. I did not flush with embarrassment. I did not avert my gaze. I did not shrink into my chair or reach for Marcus for protection. I sat perfectly upright, the faint ghost of a smile playing on my lips. I looked directly through the arrogant glare of my brother-in-law, looking past the expensive suit and the stolen confidence. I looked at a dead man walking. Every syllable of his public humiliation, every cruel joke, and the ensuing laughter of his corporate peers was currently being recorded by the federal agents waiting in the dark. He was permanently etching his arrogance into the federal record. He had demanded an audience for his triumph, entirely unaware that he had just provided a packed theater for his own spectacular execution. The trap was fully primed, and he had just willingly stepped onto the trigger plate. The laughter was still echoing off the crystal chandeliers when I stood up. The movement was smooth, completely devoid of the humiliation they expected. The camera would snap from a wide shot to a rapid extreme push-in on my face, capturing the absolute predatory calm in my eyes. I did not rush. I walked around the edge of the VIP table, the soft rustle of my silk dress, practically swallowed by the remaining chuckles of the elite crowd. Marcus remained seated, his eyes locked on Liam, serving as my silent rear guard. I climbed the 3 velvet-lined steps to the stage. The spotlight intended solely for Liam's triumph now illuminated us both. He looked confused for a fraction of a second, his arrogant smile faltering as I approached the podium. He instinctively leaned away from the microphone, expecting me to whisper a tearful surrender or a desperate plea. Instead, I reached out and adjusted the microphone stand, pulling it perfectly level with my own lips. "Thank you, brother-in-law," I said, my voice projecting crisp and clear across the vast ballroom. I smiled, a genuine expression of absolute victory. But I prefer data management over operating a switchboard. I pulled my phone from the hidden pocket of my dress. I did not look at the screen. I knew the interface by heart. My thumb found the execution sequence David had compiled in the command center. With a single decisive press, I bypassed the venue's audio-visual firewalls. Behind Liam, the massive floor-to-ceiling LED screens that had been projecting the pristine golden logo of Vanguard Sterling flickered violently. A sharp burst of digital static tore through the speakers. The golden logo shattered into a million pixels, instantly replaced by a stark, high-contrast schematic. It was a masterpiece of forensic accounting, rendered in blinding crimson and clinical white. The ballroom fell into a sudden, suffocating silence. The transition was so abrupt, so visually violent, that it literally stole the breath from the room. "What you are looking at," I announced, my voice cutting through the dead air, "is the true philanthropic vision of Liam Bradley." The screens displayed a colossal, undeniable map of active wire fraud. At the center of the display sat the Vanguard Sterling primary client holding accounts. From that central hub, bright red digital arteries pulsed outward, tracing the exact route of stolen capital. The audience watched in real time as the animation demonstrated millions of dollars draining from union pension funds and municipal retirement accounts. The red lines snaked across a digital globe, bouncing through a labyrinth of shell companies in Cyprus and the British Virgin Islands. Every single node on the screen displayed explicit, unredacted data: account numbers, routing digits, counterfeit invoices, IP addresses. I had laid bare the entire offshore tumbling network. Liam spun around to look at the screens. The camera would catch the exact devastating millisecond his reality disintegrated. The color drained from his face with sickening speed, leaving his skin a chalky, translucent white. His jaw slackened. The bespoke velvet jacket suddenly looked like a straitjacket. He reached instinctively for his earpiece, trying to signal his audiovisual team to cut the feed, but my override had permanently locked the control board. "As you can see," I continued, pacing slowly across the stage, owning the space he had just claimed, "the capital does not stay offshore. It requires a domestic entry point to become clean, usable wealth." The digital map on the screen zoomed in with terrifying speed, focusing directly on the eastern seaboard of the United States. The red lines of laundered money converged into a massive, undeniable funnel, slamming directly into a Delaware holding company. Below the holding company, the screen populated with the pristine, high-resolution logos of a chain of luxury fashion boutiques. I gestured toward the VIP table. These boutiques are owned and operated entirely by Maya. The spotlight operator, perhaps out of shock or sheer dramatic instinct, swung a secondary beam directly onto Maya. She recoiled physically, throwing a hand up to shield her face. Her metallic couture suddenly looked cheap, a desperate costume masking a federal criminal. The smug, triumphant sneer she had worn all evening collapsed into an expression of unadulterated terror. The screens shifted again, flashing massive, undeniable pie charts and fraudulent tax returns. It displayed the exact fractional skimming algorithm Liam had used, juxtaposed against the artificially inflated retail sales receipts Maya had filed with the Internal Revenue Service. It was a perfect closed loop of embezzlement and money laundering laid out so simply that a child could understand the mechanics of the crime. The silence in the ballroom finally broke. It did not return as laughter. It returned as a low, dangerous rumble. These were not just socialites. These were venture capitalists, hedge fund managers, and board members. Many of them had personal capital tied up in Vanguard sterling. They were looking at mathematical proof that their managing director was actively running a syndicate. Men in expensive tuxedos began standing up, pulling out their phones, frantically dialing their personal attorneys and crisis managers. "Turn it off!" Liam hissed, his voice dropping into a guttural, panicked register. He lunged toward me, his hands grasping empty air as I stepped smoothly out of his reach. "Turn it off right now, Chloe. You are destroying the firm." "I did not destroy the firm, Liam," I replied, the microphone catching the deadly calm in my voice. "I just audited it." The screens behind us executed their final, most devastating sequence. The global map vanished, replaced by a pair of highly specific legal documents. On the left side of the screen was the deed to my mother's historic estate. On the right side was a $10 million commercial loan agreement secured by a shell company, using that exact deed as collateral. I looked down at Patricia. She was frozen in her chair. The emerald gown seemed to weigh her down. Her eyes darted from the massive screens to Liam, then to the documents bearing her own signature from earlier that afternoon. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The bridge loan was a lie. The billionaire syndicate was a lie. The guaranteed returns were a lie. "The final piece of Liam's philanthropic puzzle," I announced, my voice echoing over the growing chaos in the room. When his offshore accounts reached their laundering capacity, he required an immediate injection of clean capital to balance the ledgers before the quarterly audit. So this afternoon, he convinced his own mother-in-law to sign over the deed to our ancestral home, completely liquidating her net worth to cover his federal crimes. Patricia let out a strangled, breathless gasp. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. She looked at Liam, the man she had worshipped, the man she had elevated above her own flesh and blood. She finally saw the monster hiding behind the bespoke suit. The ballroom was in complete uproar. The polite, curated atmosphere had shattered into total pandemonium. Investors were shouting. Security personnel were running toward the stage, unsure of who to remove or what to do. Liam was trapped in the center of the blinding spotlight, surrounded by undeniable, illuminated proof of his absolute ruin. I stepped back from the podium, leaving the microphone live. The digital map continued to pulse on the screens behind us, an unrelenting testament to my survival and their destruction. I had promised them a performance, and I had delivered the absolute collapse of their entire world. The roar of the ballroom escalated from a low rumble into absolute uncontainable panic. Chairs scraped violently against the polished marble floors as the city's financial elite scrambled to distance themselves from the radioactive epicenter of the stage. In the midst of this chaotic retreat, a single figure moved against the tide. Jonathan Vance, the global CEO of Vanguard Sterling, strode out from the shadows of the wings. He did not rush. He moved with the terrifying, lethal precision of a man who commanded billions. A rapid whip pan of the camera would capture the violent contrast. On one side, Liam was hyperventilating, his custom velvet jacket suddenly drenched in cold sweat, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. On the other side, Vance stood like a monolith of absolute, unyielding authority. Vance stepped onto the podium and physically ripped the microphone from Liam's trembling hand. The feedback shrieked, instantly silencing the panicked crowd. Vance did not look at his former golden boy. He looked directly at me. "Thank you, Chloe!" Vance's voice boomed through the speakers, a heavy, resonant baritone that commanded total submission. As our partnered cybersecurity expert, your assistance in tracking this internal rot has been invaluable to the firm. You have helped us clean up this trash before it could infect the entire portfolio. Vance finally turned his head, looking down at Liam as if he were scraping something foul off the bottom of his shoe. Liam, Vance stated, the finality in his tone echoing like a gavel strike. You are fired, effective immediately. That was the trigger word. The heavy brass-studded oak doors at the rear of the grand ballroom did not just open, they were violently breached. A tidal wave of federal agents poured into the room. They wore dark windbreakers with stark yellow FBI lettering across the back, their tactical boots heavy and loud against the marble. Outside the massive arched windows, the pulsing flash of red and blue police strobes suddenly ignited, casting frantic, erratic shadows across the ornate ceiling. "Nobody move!" A senior agent's voice bellowed through a bullhorn, cutting through the terrified gasps of the socialites. "Federal agents, secure the exits." Agent Miller, the lead investigator I had been coordinating with for the past 60 hours, marched straight down the center aisle. He bypassed the screaming billionaires and stepped directly onto the stage. Liam did not fight, he did not run. His knees simply gave out. Agent Miller hauled him back to his feet by the collar of his expensive jacket, spinning him around with professional aggression. The sharp, metallic, ratcheting sound of the heavy steel handcuffs snapping shut around Liam's wrists echoed through the microphone, which was still picking up ambient noise. It was the definitive sound of a ruined life. At the VIP table, the illusion of the untouchable family shattered into jagged pieces. Maya, realizing the magnitude of the federal raid, abandoned all pretense of loyalty. She shoved her chair back, ignoring her mother and sister entirely. She kicked off her metallic couture heels, abandoning them on the carpet, and sprinted blindly toward the discreet service doors near the kitchen. She pushed past a terrified waiter, knocking a tray of champagne glasses to the floor in a desperate bid for freedom. She slammed her hands against the swinging wooden doors, only to be met by the solid, unmoving wall of Agent Hayes. He stepped out from the service corridor, flanked by two uniformed officers. "Maya Bradley," Agent Hayes announced, his voice devoid of any sympathy. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, money laundering, and corporate conspiracy. Put your hands behind your back." And Maya thrashed, her perfectly styled hair falling into her face as the officers spun her around. She shrieked, demanding they unhand her, screaming about her social standing, but her cries were entirely ignored. They marched her back through the center of the ballroom, parading her barefoot and handcuffed past the very peers she had spent the entire evening trying to impress. The absolute humiliation on her face was a masterpiece of karmic justice. Back at the table, Nia lost her mind. She stood up, pulling at her own hair, letting out a high-pitched, hysterical wail. She looked from her handcuffed brother-in-law on the stage to her sister being frog-marched through the crowd, completely unable to process the destruction of her counterfeit reality. She grabbed the edge of the table, weeping openly, her diamond jewelry sparkling mockingly against her panicked, tear-streaked face. And then there was Patricia. My mother had not moved a single muscle since the deed to her estate was broadcast on the monitors. She stood frozen, a statue of crushed vanity. She watched Liam being led away. She watched Maya being dragged out in handcuffs. She realized in one blinding flash of horrible clarity that she was utterly destitute. The mansion was gone. The bank accounts were frozen. The elite society she worshipped was currently watching her family being dismantled by the federal government. The muscles in her hand finally surrendered. The crystal wine glass she had been clutching slipped from her fingers. It hit the marble floor, shattering into 100 glittering shards, the dark red wine splashing across the hem of her unpaid-for emerald gown. It looked like blood. I stood next to Marcus, my posture relaxed, my breathing slow and steady. I did not gloat. I did not walk over to offer a villainous monologue. The revenge was not in screaming at them. The revenge was in the cold, clinical execution of justice. I watched the FBI secure the perimeter, watched the CEO of Vanguard Sterling shake hands with the lead agents, and watched my family reap the exact harvest they had sown. The digital map behind the stage finally went dark, plunging the podium back into shadow. The trap had closed. The eradication was total logical and flawlessly absolute. The camera slowly pulls back, leaving the chaotic memory of the Pierre Hotel ballroom far behind. The frame expands smoothly, revealing the pristine, soundproof interior of my new corner office. I stood perfectly still before the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows, looking out over the Manhattan skyline. The brilliant, bruised light of the setting sun washed over my face, reflecting the quiet, undeniable pride of absolute victory. 1 month had passed since the Vanguard Sterling Gala. The fallout had been swift, brutal, and entirely merciless. Liam's carefully constructed empire had collapsed overnight. He was currently sitting in a maximum security federal holding cell, stripped of his bespoke suits, and staring down a mandatory minimum of 15 years for wire fraud, embezzlement, and corporate conspiracy. Maya's retail conglomerate had been forcefully liquidated by the IRS, leaving her completely bankrupt, her accounts frozen as she awaited her own federal trial. Nia, stripped of her fraudulent diamonds and abruptly cut off from her brother-in-law's illicit capital, had lost her luxury penthouse. Destitute, terrified, and utterly humiliated, she had been forced to drag her remaining designer suitcases back to Patricia's estate. However, the sanctuary of the ancestral home was a fragile illusion. The $10 million commercial bridge loan Liam had maliciously secured against the property went into immediate catastrophic default the exact second the FBI froze his assets. The bank had initiated aggressive, expedited foreclosure proceedings. My phone buzzed against the sleek mahogany surface of my desk. The caller ID displayed my mother's name. I let it ring 3 distinct times before lifting the receiver to my ear, keeping my gaze fixed on the glowing city below. "Chloe, please!" Patricia's voice broke through the speaker, shattered and weeping. The arrogant, untouchable matriarch who had sat at the VIP table just 30 days ago was completely gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading shell of a woman. "You have to help us. The bank just sent the final notice. They are taking the house. They are taking everything. You have the money now, Chloe. Your firm is thriving. You can fix this. Please forgive me. Save your family's home." I did not raise my voice. I did not gloat. I spoke with the cold, absolute tranquility of a storm that had already laid waste to the landscape. "I did fix it, Mother," I replied smoothly, watching the city lights begin to flicker to life against the gathering twilight. "I contacted the bank's asset management division yesterday morning. The commercial loan has been completely settled. The house is no longer in foreclosure." A sharp, desperate intake of breath crackled over the cellular line. "Oh, thank God!" Patricia sobbed, her voice heavy with immediate relief. "Thank you, Chloe. I knew you would not let us down. I knew you still cared." "You misunderstand the transaction." I interrupted, my voice slicing cleanly through her manufactured relief. "I did not pay off your loan to clear your debt. I purchased the debt directly from the bank. The estate is now legally the exclusive property of my corporate holding company. You do not own it. Liam does not own it. I own it." Dead, suffocating silence fell over the line. "You have exactly 30 days to pack your belongings." I stated the finality of the words, ringing with absolute poetic justice. "I suggest you and your precious daughter start looking for a much smaller apartment. Goodbye, Mother." I ended the call and placed the phone face down on the desktop. Reaching out, I picked up a delicate porcelain teacup and took a slow, deliberate sip of Earl Grey. The imaginary camera continued its slow, steady pullback, widening the frame to capture me standing alone, powerful and unbothered, against the vast illuminated expanse of the city. The shadows in the office lengthened the sunset, reflecting brilliantly off the glass pane, until the scene slowly faded into a deep, profoundly satisfying black.